Good evening, fellow counselors and everyone. May we clear our hearts and our minds. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and opportunity. There's so much going on in the world, especially here in our city, but we know that there is nothing that you cannot do. As we start this budget process, Father, we ask that you be with the counselors that have been elected for this city and this county, that we do what's right, what's best, that we govern and be good stewards, fiduciary responsible, and that we bring about legislation, that we that we go through the budget that's being proposed by Mayor Hogsett and his staff and his team, that we look for things that are and be accountable for the monies of the taxpayers, and that things that are going to help not just those that are rich and that not those that who build infrastructure, Father, but those as well who, what you say are the least of us, that we help as well in our social programs and other things. We ask a special prayer tonight for the leaders of the council, what we call leadership, our president, Osley, our vice president, Adamson, our majority leader, Lewis, our minority leader, Mowry, and all the chairmen that sit over these committees as they govern and go through the budget and provide leadership to those on the committee, Father. Be with them, and those that present openly, providing transparency and fullness, Father, is what we ask for. And for those that want to be engaged, to ask those questions and be discerning, Father, and provide input. And Father, we just ask peace among our cities as we've seen upheaval, as we've seen riots and protests, as we've seen across our city, we've seen the COVID-19 virus, but we know that you're a healer, and we know that you're a way maker, and we know you can calm this land. So we ask these things and many blessings in your son Jesus' name. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilman Jackson. Chairwoman Jackson. Our clerk will now conduct a voice roll call. Councilors, please signify your presence by stating your name and answering present, following the clerk's reading of your name, so that we have a clear record of who is in attendance. Madam Clerk, please proceed with the roll call.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilor Adamson.
Councilor Adamson, present.
Councilor Ane.
Councilor Ane, present.
Councilor Barth.
Barth, present.
Councilor Boots.
Boots, present.
Councilor Brown.
Brown, present.
Councilor Carlino.
Councilor Carlino, present.
Councilor Dilk.
Councilor Dilk, present.
Councilor Ethan Evans.
Present.
Councilor Jared Evans.
Councilor Jared Evans, present.
Councilor Graves.
Councilor Graves, present.
Councilor Gray. Councilor Gray.
Councilor Gray, present.
Councilor Hart.
Councilor Hart, present.
Councilor Jackson.
Councilor Jackson, present.
Councilor Jones.
Councilor Jones, present.
Councilor Larison.
Councilor Larison, present.
Councilor Lewis.
Councilor Lewis, present.
Councilor Mascari.
Councilor Mascari, present.
Councilor McCormick.
Councilor McCormick, present.
Councilor Mowry.
Councilor Mowry, present.
Councilor Oliver.
Oliver, District 9, present.
Councilor Osley.
Councilor Osley, present.
Councilor Potts.
Councilor Potts, present.
Councilor Ray.
Good evening, Councilor Ray, present.
Councilor Robinson.
Councilor Robinson, present.
Thank you, Mr. President. All councilors are in attendance.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We are honored this evening to have with us the Mayor of the City of Indianapolis, the Honorable Joseph H. Hogsett, to make his presentation of the city's proposed 2021 budget. Mayor Hogsett.
President Osili, Vice President Adamson, leaders Lewis and Mowry, and to all my colleagues on the City County Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Over the next 2 months, we'll be spending hours talking about numbers, and I'll spend a few minutes tonight doing that myself. But I want to begin with the number that stuck with me the most as I prepared to speak with all of you. 222. That's how many days have passed since we gathered in a bipartisan display of civic pride and took our oaths of office together. Some of us reaffirmed our dedication to public service that day, while others raised their right hands for the very first time. But regardless of tenure or ideology or age, the thing that struck me was the consistency with which each one of you stood ready to roll up your sleeves and get to work tackling the big challenges that lay before our city. Looking toward an uncertain future that day, we knew that the ability to weather the coming storms would be determined by our humility, by our persistence, and most of all, by our unity. In front of our family and friends, and in front of one another, we acknowledged a common commitment to the betterment of our city and its residents, a commitment that would transcend political party, personal ambition, and self-interest. Of course, none of us could have predicted what followed. Less than 24 hours before we were sworn in, the World Health Organization was notified of an unknown virus outbreak in Wuhan. Within 48 hours, nearly 4 dozen people were sick. In the weeks and months to come, COVID-19 would spread across the globe with deadly speed, including here in Indiana. Throughout our 200 years, Indianapolis and its people have known adversity, but time and time again, we have risen to the challenge of our time. The Great Flood of 1913, World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, economic recessions, the 9/11 attacks. And notably, when Indianapolis was confronted with a pandemic flu in 1918, residents and businesses joined together to protect themselves and each other. A century ago, a global pandemic led to a citywide shutdown and a requirement that residents wear masks in public. But we did not falter. The result? Indianapolis had one of the lowest death rates of any large city in the country. Over time and across centuries, where others may have wavered, Indianapolis has consistently risen as one city to meet adversity head on. These last few months have been no different. That's why I want to offer my heartfelt thanks to all 25 of my colleagues on the council. Over the last 5 months, you have provided this city with leadership in a time of crisis. Nearly 500,000 free face coverings provided to Indianapolis residents and organizations. $15 million for rental assistance in our neighborhoods. $25 million in paycheck protection loan capital, and more than $12 million in direct grants for small businesses and nonprofits. Millions more to fund food programs and the rapid rehousing of our homeless neighbors. And most critically, $20 million in funding for expanded community testing and contact tracing. Right now, those funds are allowing IUPUI's Fairbanks School of Public Health, in partnership with the Marion County Public Health Department, to hire hundreds of contact tracers who will provide an invaluable service in our efforts to contain and mitigate the spread of the virus in coming months. Once again, I want to thank all of you for what you have done, along with our amazing community partners, including Indy Chamber, United Way, Gleaners, Midwest Food Bank, Second Helpings, the Lilly Endowment, and the Indianapolis Arts Council. And I especially want to recognize the tireless work of the Director for the Marion County Public Health Department, Dr. Virginia Kane. Make no mistake, we have a long journey toward recovery ahead, and we must continue to come together to combat this virus while lifting our neighbors in need. That's why tonight we are submitting a new request to appropriate more than $16 million in new coronavirus relief funding. This will include an additional $7.5 million in rental assistance for those whose livelihoods have been impacted by the pandemic. It also includes more than $300,000 in supplemental completion grants through our Indy Achieves program for students at Ivy Tech and IUPUI whose ability to afford college has been threatened by the pandemic. This appropriation request also funds $1.1 million in additional adult education funding for those who need to retrain or to transition to other employment. I want to thank our nonprofit and higher education partners for their work on these programs, including Employ Indy, the Excel Center, Indy Reads, Marion University, Martin University, and the YMCA of Central Indiana, as well as Washington, Warren, and Wayne Township Schools. Those are just 3 examples from this appropriation, and there's more to come. Our efforts will continue so long as this health crisis is hurting families, students, and businesses. And I want to urge Congress to act quickly to equip cities and states to expand these programs in the future. Before we get to the budget, I also want to acknowledge that for far too long in Indianapolis, the path toward health and prosperity has not been equally available to all. And that has been made all too clear in the disproportionate impact that COVID-19 has had on Black and brown residents. That's because time and time again over the last 2 centuries, city leaders have let their focus on the rising tide of our city's bright future distract them from the fact that too many neighbors and too many neighborhoods have been left behind to fend for themselves. Indianapolis, that history must not be repeated now. And as mayor, working with the City County Council, I intend to do my part to give voice to those who have too often been silenced. It's not enough to acknowledge systemic racism. You don't get a participation ribbon in the fight against injustice. What we need in Indianapolis is a process of healing that is not implemented, but lived, both in public and in private. Lived especially by white residents in positions of power, like myself. A personal responsibility to dedicate our lives to change that begins within and flows outward. Then and only then can we begin the process of lifting the yoke off the backs of marginalized neighbors and assume the weight of our own obligations to reconcile and rebuild. Over the last few months, that's meant listening and then acting. I've appointed an independent review panel to assess how we handled the response to recent protests and how we can do better in the future. The Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department has adopted a new use of force policy, which bans chokeholds, implements proportionality of force principles, and places an emphasis on de-escalation. In the last few weeks, IMPD has also announced it is banning the use of no-knock warrants and begun a long-awaited installation of body cameras on members of IMPD's Operations Division. And those policies will soon be overseen by a new civilian-led use of force review board, which will have expanded jurisdiction over all incidents in which force is used against a resident. And tonight, I also want to lend my support to the City County Council's review of how these policies are created and administered, the so-called General Orders Committee. It is clear that civilian involvement in that process is long overdue. I look forward to working with my partners on the council to bring that reform to our police department's policy-making process. But our pursuit of greater equity is not limited to criminal justice. It must also bring about economic justice. During the pandemic, the City of Indianapolis, in partnership with the Indy Chamber, has provided relief for small businesses impacted by COVID-19 restrictions. Early on, relief took the form of Indy Chamber's rapid response loans. Of the $3.5 million disbursed, 64% went to minority or women-owned businesses. Later, Support came in the form of the Paycheck Protection Plan, with 37% awarded to Black-owned businesses and 11% to Latinx-owned businesses. And later, as firms began reopening, we rolled out our Restart grants, half of which have gone to disadvantaged businesses so far. But there is more. 2 years ago, this council approved the first disparity study conducted on city contracts in over 2 decades. This January brought the conclusion of that study. This evening, I introduce a series of changes to city policy promoting greater utilization of minority-owned businesses in city contracts. These changes will also require the city to undertake an updated disparity study every 5 years. This effort was overseen by Director Camille Blunt and the Office of Minority and Women Business Development. Together with our ongoing inclusive growth strategy, these efforts will allow us to take another important step forward as we seek to demolish economic barriers in Indianapolis. But the process we begin tonight can't simply be about where we have been. We must also talk about where we are going and how this introduced budget can help us get there. I'll begin by stating the obvious. COVID-19 has had a crippling impact on the lives of Indianapolis residents. It will no doubt bring fiscal challenges to our desks in the coming years. But we can take some comfort in knowing that Indianapolis and this council has spent the past 4 years putting our fiscal house in order. We are better prepared than the city has been in a generation. Back to back to back balanced budgets passed by the City County Council, multiple credit upgrades in recent years, the restoration of our fiscal stability fund to historic highs, and the payment of more than $400 million in debt since 2016. And tonight, I am proud to submit to the council a 4th consecutive balanced budget that prepares for the future while fully funding today. Together, we will spend the next 2 months poring over this budget. But I want to highlight aspects that I know will be of interest. First, I want to acknowledge what is not in this budget tonight for the vast majority of city-county employees, and that's funding for cost of living wage increases. Departments, too, have been largely flatlined. But included in this budget are things that can help grow a more prosperous and equitable city. To start with, thanks to the work of President Vop Osili, Chairman Leroy Robinson, and others, I'm pleased to partner with the council tonight to formally join the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, or GARE. In collaboration with the Central Indiana Community Foundation, GARE will be working to empower city-county agencies and help them address racial inequities through policies, planning, and delivery of services. 2020 will be a year so many remember for so many reasons. But aside from the pandemic that has reshaped our lives, there was no bigger story this year than the national cry for criminal justice reform in America. IMPD heard that cry, redoubling its ongoing efforts. The initial results have already been mentioned tonight: outfitting officers with body-worn cameras, promoting treatment over incarceration for mental illness and substance abuse, and the creation of a new use of force review board. Additionally, this year the city launched an initiative aimed at better understanding how our public safety systems impact Indianapolis residents. In conjunction with the NYU School of Law and the City County Council, we are hosting public meetings, analyzing data, and tracking outcomes, all in an effort to reimagine public safety in Indianapolis. In 2021, this spirit of reform will continue as we work to bolster officer training with a new facility that will allow officers to conduct use of force and de-escalation training in environments that better mimic what our police experience day to day. We will also continue investing in the apparatus necessary for our public safety agencies to do their job. For the police department, that means continued investment in technology, including body-worn cameras. For the Indianapolis Fire Department, that means standing by our pledge to maintain a 10-year limit on the age of all frontline equipment. In 2021, we will purchase 6 new engines and 4 new ladders while maintaining current staffing levels. Earlier this year, one of our officers, Breanne Leith, lost her life in the line of duty in response to a domestic abuse call. This tragedy brought to the forefront the danger faced by our first responders every day, and it underscores our commitment to a holistic approach to public safety that includes meaningful investments in housing, education, and economic opportunity. So far this year, the Office of Public Health and Safety has dedicated more than $2 million through FEMA and the CARES Act to the task of providing emergency housing, meals, and services for our homeless neighbors during this emergency. Partnerships with Gleaners and Midwest Food Banks, Second Helpings, and the Indy Hunger Network have provided thousands of families food security during a very insecure time. And this past February, before the crisis even began, we passed the Tenants' Bill of Rights, ensuring that more residents know their rights and responsibilities as renters. The 2021 budget includes $250,000 in continued funding for the Tenant Legal Assistance Project and the Eviction Avoidance Project with Indiana Legal Services, and increases funding for the Community Violence Reduction Team so that they can better address challenges presented by the COVID-19 pandemic. This year, one of our departments was hit particularly hard by the realities of COVID-19. But despite more than 50 confirmed COVID-19 cases among employees, the Department of Public Works team worked hard to address neighborhood needs and continue major infrastructure projects, including roads, sidewalks, bridges, greenways, and more. For 2021, that impressive commitment to our city's infrastructure remains. This budget includes more than $158 million for roads, bridges, sidewalks, and trails, and over $44 million in stormwater projects, and more than $5 million for Indy Parks, so that we can continue addressing long overdue capital needs in our parks facilities. And in order to complete this work, we must have a robust workforce. That means maintaining DPW's staffing levels, including the second shift crew, which was added as part of the 2020 budget to increase capacity and reduce overtime spending. Now more than ever, we must recommit to meaningful investments in our neighbors and in our neighborhoods. Already, the Department of Metropolitan Development has helped the city administer $5.6 million in CARES Act funding. This has kept lights on, water running, and internet connected for families, students, and employees. In 2021, DMD will expand on the Lift Indy program, a multi-year commitment to financially supporting the goals of an Indianapolis neighborhood by expanding to 2 neighborhoods with a specific focus on areas hardest hit by the pandemic. Later this year, DMD will also begin a planning effort for the redevelopment of the Oak Tree Apartments site with the help of community stakeholders. This long-neglected complex was an eyesore for many neighbors and was finally torn down last October. By summer of 2021, we should have clear plans for the future of the site. An investment in our neighborhoods necessarily means an investment in education. This year, when so many students were social distancing at home, our Office of Education Innovation came together with business and philanthropic partners to launch the e-learning fund. This nearly $3.5 million fund has helped schools across Marion County to close the technology gap for remote learning. But an investment in equitable education also means diversifying faculty and administration in our schools. Through new charters and school opening in 2020 and 2021, OEI is supporting more school leaders of color than ever, ensuring that students not only have access to experienced, high-quality educators, but that their schools are culturally relevant and responsive to their needs. The 2021 budget will also allow us to continue our work to ensure more Marion County residents have the post-secondary degree or credential needed to attain good-paying jobs through continued funding of our Indy Achieves program. Finally, I'll note that this administration's commitment to art remains. In recent months, we have witnessed how art is one of the primary languages that communities use to be heard. It is a way we tell our story. And so this budget continues to fully fund $1.1 million for grants to community arts organizations. In this moment, Indianapolis stands at a crossroads. The challenges are new, but the choice is not. Either choose the path of bold unity and mutual understanding, or we must turn away from that which has allowed our city to overcome every obstacle in its path for 2 centuries. Every day, people are choosing that path across our city. Every day, our first responders have left their families behind to serve the public at a time when everyone else is being told to stay home. Every day, our public works and parks employees kept local government working and critical facilities open. Every day, in clinics and hospitals across our city, doctors and nurses and support staff deliver life-saving health care despite the risk to their own health. Every day, food and service providers serve thousands of meals to those in need across our city, while volunteers lend a hand to ensure no family is left hungry during this time of crisis. Every day, we see that unique Indianapolis spirit on display in ways big and small. Neighbors checking on neighbors, small business retooling to make masks or sanitizers, philanthropic and corporate leaders stepping forward, and above all, residents masking up for one another. But as individuals, we are not strong enough to stand alone in this storm. We need one another, one city, without exception, if we are to prosper. That's because ours has never been a city to wait for the right moment to come. We've always understood we must make these moments ourselves. And with this budget and this council and this city in this moment, I'm confident history will look back with admiration for the difficult choices made and the fearless togetherness of a people who made the change that this time required. I thank you.
Mayor, we thank you for your presentation this evening and your commitment to equity and your commitment to our city and all of its residents. And we look forward to working with you and your administration through this process. The next item on our agenda, our fellow councilors, is official communications. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, you are hereby notified the regular meetings of the City County Council and Police, Fire, and Solid Waste Collection Service Special Service District Councils will be held electronically and in the City County building in the council chambers on Monday, August 10th, 2020 at 7 o'clock p.m. The purposes of such meetings being to conduct any and all business that may come properly before the regular meetings of the councils. Note, this meeting will be held by electronic communications due to COVID-19 coronavirus public health emergency in accordance with Indiana Governor Holcomb's Executive Order 20-09 and Indiana Code 5-14-1.5-3.6. Sincerely, Bob Osley, President, City County Council. Ladies and gentlemen, pursuant to the laws of the state of Indiana, a cause to be published in the Court and Commercial Record and in the Indianapolis Star on Friday, July 31st, 2020, a copy of a notice of public hearing on proposal number 225, 2020. Said hearing to be held on Monday, August 10th, 2020 at 7 o'clock p.m. in the Public Assembly Room of the City County Building. Respectfully, Sarita Hughes, Clerk of the City County Council. Ladies and gentlemen, I have approved with my signature and delivered this day to the clerk of the City County Council, Sarita Hughes, the following ordinances. General Resolution number 13, Special Resolutions number 19 and 20. Joseph H. Hoxat, Mayor. Mr. President, this concludes the official communication.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I just want to give a message to anyone who is watching this evening that we have a very heavy storm coming from the west, and would ask that you all take great precaution. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda, and I believe that Vice President Adamson has a motion he'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I would move to amend the agenda to advance proposal number 247, 2020, currently in the introduction of proposals, to the first item of business under special orders public hearing for action this evening. There are time issues regarding this proposal that require passage before the next council meeting. And I so move.
Thank you, Mr. President. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. So moved and seconded. Any comments or questions from councilors?
Point of order, Mr. President. Did you do consent for the agenda?
We're doing it.
Oh, okay.
This is what we're doing now. Are there any comments or questions from councilors? Councilor Ethan Evans.
Sorry, I didn't hear the number of the proposal.
Proposal number 247. All right, seeing no comments, and having been moved and seconded, Madam Clerk, will you now take a roll call vote?
Councilor Adamson?
Councilor Adamson, aye.
Councilor Ane?
Councilor Ane, aye.
Councilor Barth?
Barth, aye.
Councilor Boots?
Councilor Boots, aye.
Councilor Brown?
Counselor Brown, aye.
Councilor Carlino?
Counselor Carlino, aye.
Councilor Dilk?
Councilor Dilk, aye.
Councilor Ethan Evans?
Councilor Ethan Evans, aye.
Councilor Jared Evans?
Jared Evans, aye.
Graves?
Councilor Graves, aye.
Councilor Gray?
Councilor Gray, aye.
Councilor Hart?
Councilor Hart, aye.
Councilor Jackson?
Councilor Jackson, aye.
Councilor Jones?
Counselor Jones, aye.
Councilor Larison?
Counselor Larison, aye.
Councilor Lewis?
Counselor Lewis, aye.
Councilor Mascari?
Councilor Mascari, aye.
Councilor McCormick?
Counselor McCormick, aye.
Councilor Mowry?
Councilor Mallory, aye.
Councilor Oliver? Councilor Oliver? I'll circle back. Councilor Oakley?
Councilor Oakley, aye.
Councilor Potts?
Councilor Potts, aye.
Councilor Ray?
Councilor Ray, aye.
Councilor Robinson?
Councilor Robinson, aye.
And again, Councilor Oliver? Mr. President, that would be 20.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We now have an official vote to add proposal number 247 to the agenda for action this evening. It will now be placed under special orders, public hearing for action this evening. If there are no further motions, do I have consent to adopt the agenda as amended? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Very good. The next item on our agenda is approval of the journals for July the 13th, 2020. Do I have consent? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Do we have any nays? All right, very good. The next item on our agenda then is the proposed 2021 City County Annual Budget Overview presentation by our City Controller, Mr. Ken Clark. Mr. Clark. And councilors, I would ask that we please hold all questions tonight for subsequent committee meetings. Mr. Clark.
Thank you, President Osili, Vice President Adamson, Leader Lewis, Leader Mowry, City County Councilors. I appreciate the opportunity to present to you Mayor Hogsett's 2021 proposed budget. I'll move to share presentation. Hold on one moment. In my presentation tonight, I intend on covering the current state of our finances in the city-county government. I'll also give a little bit of information about how we got here, a history, if you will, of the good work this city-county council, along with Mayor Hogsett's administration, has done in the last 4 years to prepare the city to navigate what are some rough waters ahead financially. And I will highlight items in the 2021 budget I believe will be of interest to this council, but also the public may be viewing this as well. We've really taken a multi-year strategy in attempting to shore up the city's finances, which has led to one of the strongest financial positions the city's been in many, many years. Consistently balanced budgets, now 3 back-to-back balanced budgets, as well as the 2021 proposed balanced budget as well, meaning that our revenues have met or exceeded our expenses. Operationally, we've continued to move forward with budgets that are balanced and that we can continue to live within our means without any tax increases. We've also preserved fund balances and grown those balances where possible. Protected and improved the city's credit rating. I often talk about this as it relates to our own personal credit scores. The city has continued to improve, allowing us to issue debt at a lower rate. And then we've maintained or increased investments along the way, public safety, infrastructure, neighborhoods, and economic development as well. As we set that foundation, I'll go in detail of some information that'll tell us where we are, but I'll also go into our 2021 budget. And here I lay out a little bit of our strategy and approach to that 2021 budget. We have flatlined expense budgets to prepare for what is an unknown while maintaining government spending through this recovery. We are still in the midst of a pandemic that is wreaking havoc on our county, our state, and our country and our entire world. And it is our intent to do our best to maintain spending levels without going the route of furloughs and cuts to services to our citizens. It is our feeling that it is most important for government to maintain spending in these times of uncertainty when there is so much going on that we can't control. We've also identified reserves. This is pre-targeted underspend opportunities in the agency and department budgets. Should things continue at the rate they are and we have any financial concerns coming into the 2021 budget, we would be able to reduce spending in real time. Agencies and departments have already identified those reserves that they feel they could go without spending if needed be. We've also continued our conservative revenue estimates to grow fund balances in preparation for our 2020 income tax loss, which will be felt in 2022. I'll talk a little bit more about that and how the mechanics of that work, but we know that 2022 and beyond will be very challenging years fiscally for the city. And so our conservative revenue estimating allows us to make sure that we're growing fund balances and protecting the city. And of course, in our 2021 budget, we continue our commitment to no tax increases, living within our means and making sure we're protecting citizens from increased costs. Jumping into a little bit of the history, I have here one chart showing our budgeted expenditures versus our actuals, and another one on the revenue side versus budgeted versus actuals. As you can see, in the last 4 years, we've continued to be able to come in below our budgeted expenditures. The result of this is increased fund balances and more stable city-county fiscal state. The budgeted revenue versus actuals, you'll also see our actual revenues have outpaced our budgeted revenues each year. That conservative approach, again, to budgeting our revenues allows us to continue to grow fund balances and protect the city from whatever may come. Of course, we're in the midst of that unknown now, and I feel very confident going forward the city is prepared for this. I want to talk a little bit about fund balance policy versus actuals. This is actually a policy of the City County Council, passed by the City County Council, to maintain thresholds for where our expenditures or where our fund balances can be as a percentage of our expenditures. And you'll see we've continued to outpace. Our fund balances have continued to be strong, well above what is the policy laid out here. These are operational, and so these are fund balances in which we can rely on if needed, but that we continue to protect should anything else come up. I want to talk a little bit about the Fiscal Stability Fund balance. As many councilors know, the Fiscal Stability Fund is not a rainy day fund per se. The rainy day fund is a fund that we've used in the past and stockpiled money. This Fiscal Stability Fund is laid out instead as a protection. As we issue debt, this allows our bondholders to know that we can meet our obligations. And as our obligations increase over time, we will also increase the fund balance to make sure that we continue to be very attractive to our creditors. Our credit rating upgrades since 2016 continued really strong fiscal management has been rewarded. Think of this as you think of your own credit score. The city has continued, and you'll notice in 3 of our 4, we have a stable outlook, AAA ratings, AA plus ratings. These are all but one is an improvement over where we started back in 2015. This means for us, again, lower rates when we are issuing debt to do important and critical projects for the city. For this council, even tonight, there's road bonds that are able to be acquired at lower rates because the city's sound fiscal management has allowed for it. Moving to the 2021 introduced balanced budget. As you can see, our city and county budgeted revenues exceed our city and county budgeted expenses. Our estimated change in fund balances, the surplus, as we would call it, is $113,884. We'll go into a little more detail in the following slides about how that's made up and what the changes are. In our 2021 projected revenue, you'll see our property tax has grown, and I'll go into this in detail in the next slide, by $15 million year over year. So 2021, we see some slight growth. Now in a $1.3 billion budget, $15 million is a minor growth in the overall budget, a little over 1%. Income tax, we're holding flat at the same levels that we had budgeted for 2020. The unknown coming ahead, we've decided to be conservative in that approach to make sure that we don't overextend ourselves as it relates to income tax revenue. Intergovernmental, $316 million there. It includes state and federal grants, our gas tax, and other state shared revenues. I won't go into detail into the other smaller sources, but of course those sources also help fund our operations. This slide shows local taxes paid in Marion County. Now, these are taxes paid here locally by our citizens that are then used in our budgeting for services. Again, make note that bottom block that you'll notice from 2020 estimated at $369 million, growing to $384 million. That is the property tax growth. 2020 estimated on our income tax includes the supplemental income tax distribution we received in the spring of this year, which is noted there. That large supplemental, 24.7 million supplemental income tax distribution went to fund balance instead of being programmed like sometimes it has in the past. And so we are holding at the $354 million for our income tax for 2021. In our 2021 introduced appropriations, these are high-level groupings that we've laid out to give an idea of where dollars in the city-county budget are allocated. Public safety initiatives making up 37%, criminal justice services making up another 21%, our other public services make up 25%, executive, legislative, administrative services make up 8%, and our debt service and pension liabilities at 9%. The breakdown by county agency and city department. So first, county agencies, you'll notice the sheriff at 36%, other county agencies at 21%, Superior Court at 18% of the county budget, and then the prosecutor and public defender at 9% and 7% respectively. As is typical on the county side, the criminal justice system makes up a large portion of that budget, and then Information Services Agency, our IT department, makes up 9%. The city department side, the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department makes up 29% of the city budget. Indianapolis Fire Department makes up 22%, Public Works at 20%, and so on. Of course, noting some critical services from Parks and Recreation, Metropolitan Development, and Business Services also included here. I'll go into the highlights and some of what's included in this budget to give a little more insight at the start of this process so that councilors can prepare for committee, but also to give our citizens who may be watching at home a better understanding of what's included in this budget. You'll find as I go through these slides, many of these are maintaining levels of funding as opposed to adding a lot of new funding. The minor increase in overall revenue means that we've really held the line in terms of expenses. So from a public safety perspective, we have funding for new and existing violence reduction and intervention initiatives. This is through our Office of Public Health and Safety. We have $3 million for violent crime prevention grants. It's a partnership with CICF. Maintaining our $300,000 level of funding for our community-based violence prevention partnership grants program, as well as maintaining our $300,000 funding level for victim and witness assistance program, which we've been moving forward with. This does include one of our expansions of a program. This is the expansion of the group violence intervention program. Many of you counselors are already aware of this program, but we've added another $155,000 in the budget to help expand on that program as well. Community programming, public safety. This council approved a tenants' rights bill earlier this year, and with that included an appropriation of $250,000 to be able to administer that program. We now include that in the operational budget going forward, so we will continue to provide those services to our citizens. Continued funding for the Rubin Engagement Center. As we know, the Assessment and Intervention Center opening later this year. Rubin Engagement Center will become a part of that on the new Community Justice Campus, but we have continued the funding level for that as well. Maintaining support for the Pathway to Employment Jobs program for our homeless neighbors. Many of you have been involved and are aware of the program, which allows our homeless neighbors to have an opportunity to have gainful employment and make additional dollars for themselves. And then maintaining the $500,000 in annual funding for the Indy Food Fund and other food programming. This includes the Compass application that's obviously been very critical during COVID in helping our citizens find food resources when they need them for their families, and in other programs as well. Public safety technology. This budget in 2021 includes, for the first time, a full year of body-worn cameras for IMPD's operations division. That means that all IMPD officers will have a full year of being fully outfitted, all 1,100. This includes our B-Link public and private partnership in a downtown district to help improve safety downtown. B-Link, for those of you who haven't looked at it, blinkindy.org. You can check out the services provided through that. It's a public-private partnership that allows for those businesses to share access to their cameras to IMPD to help with surveillance and manage of safety of their locations. It also includes upgrades of dash cams for 25 vehicles. Currently, there are about 11 vehicles outfitted with dash cams. This is an expansion of the dash cam program, which is included in the 2021 budget. And then additional investments in public safety communications. Obviously, we've funded fully the maintenance and support of our new computer-aided dispatch system, but there are also additional upgrades being made to allow our computer-aided dispatch system to work seamlessly with our new body-worn camera system, allowing triggered events to turn on cameras automatically. We continue to make investments into that computer-aided dispatch program as we move forward. On the criminal justice reform side, the legal defense of children in need of social services and the initial hearings court under the public defender is funded. Guardian ad litem under the Marion Superior Court. Continued investment in the upcoming transition of our community justice campus. Many of you are aware, over half of the tenants of the city-county building, which have been here since the 60s, will be moving. And so we've started to actually budget and fund for that transition that will happen in the fourth quarter of 2021. Increased funding for additional staff for the public defender, the Marion Circuit Court, and the coroner's office needed to be able to keep up with caseloads, and increased funding for additional supplies and pathology services for the Marion County Coroner's Office as well. Moving to infrastructure, there's more than $158 million for roads, resurfacing bridges, sidewalks, and trails. There's also the $50 million road bond appropriation tonight. The council will be hearing, or it will be introduced tonight for council to take to committee and review. $44 million for stormwater projects, capital projects. DPW will begin leasing solid waste vehicles. Funding for 28 vehicles is built into this budget. DPW is committed to 0 furloughs through 2020 and 2021. So all the way through 2021, maintaining the staffing levels for DPW to continue the important work that DPW does. This is an overview of those items included in the 2021 in the Transportation Capital Plan. This obviously will be covered in great detail in the Public Works Committee later this week, as will the 2021 Stormwater Capital Plan. Of course, this is a 4-year plan. We're showing you in this slide just the 2021 projects. And of course, it will be covered in more detail in the Public Works Committee later this week. Some capital purchases that are going to be made through this budget as well. So we have $1.4 million for new police officer vehicles included in this budget, $1.5 million for the Indianapolis Fire Department's apparatus. That includes 6 engines and 4 ladders. This budget does maintain the increase in of $1 million to the Parks Department capital budget so they can continue to respond to critical needs. $1.6 million for new solid waste trucks, $270,000 for the Indianapolis Animal Care Services trucks and cage inserts are needed for that department. And it also includes new equipment and materials for the Marion County Forensic Services Agency, which would be our crime lab. Some special initiatives as well. We have an expansion of the Lift Indy program. As the mayor had mentioned, we're expanding the Lift Indy program to specifically be in neighborhoods hardest hit by the pandemic. Continues the funding for 5 veteran service officers. Many of you are aware each county is required to have 1 veteran service officer. Of course, Marion County maintains more veterans than any other county in the state. And we maintain 5 veteran service officers to provide services to those veterans. Programming that supports and connects individuals experiencing homelessness and permanent supportive housing is in this budget. The same, many of those programs we've mentioned and discussed in prior budgets are funded moving forward to continue to address this issue. Maintaining the $2 million in scholarships and grants for Marion County residents who are pursuing post-secondary degrees through the India Achieves program. We also maintain the $1.1 million of direct grants to the Indianapolis arts organizations that was in the budget in prior years as well. And our continued partnership with Keep Indianapolis Beautiful, totaling $4.75 million through 2022. We're keeping those commitments as well. With that, I'll just end by thanking all the counselors. Thank you for the time tonight. Thank you for all of your involvement thus far in this process. As we move into committees and we start discussing the individual budgets of the agencies and departments, I look forward to hearing your feedback on your priorities and the things that you need to include in this budget going forward. And I hope you will, I look forward to working with you all as we go through that process. Thank you so much for the time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Controller. We appreciate your presentation this evening. We look forward to working with you as well. The next item on our agenda is proposal number 47, referred to Administration and Finance Committee. Chairman Mascari. I've gotten a note here that Sharon has lost power. We may need to come back to him. In fact, this evening, because of the power of this storm, we may need to have some flexibility, councilors. You can bear with. Thank you. I'll move ahead to proposal number 200. If I can get consent, may I get consent?
Consent.
Anyone opposed, please signify by saying nay. Thank you, councilors. The next item on our agenda is proposal number 200, which is referred to Metropolitan and Economic Development Committee. Chairwoman Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Proposal number 200 was heard. Actually, proposal 200 was heard in Admin and Finance.
We will go back then. Do forgive me. Admin and Finance, we will have to move on from that. Forgive me. Proposal number 83, which was referred to Metropolitan Economic Development Committee. Chairwoman Lewis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Proposal number 83 nominates Merv Enders for appointment to the Economic Development Commission. Mr. Chairman was present to answer questions. The proposal passed out of committee by a vote of 10-0. Mr. President, I so move.
The motion has been moved and seconded. Do we get a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Councilor. Are there comments from councilors? All right, seeing none, then we will proceed to roll call for our vote. Madam Clerk, on proposal number 83.
Councilor Adamson.
Councilor Adamson, aye.
Councilor Ane.
Paul Ane, aye.
Councilor Barth.
Barth, aye.
Councilor Boots.
Boots, aye.
Councilor Brown.
Councilor Brown, aye.
Councilor Carlino.
Counselor Carlino, aye.
Councilor Dilk.
Councilor Dilk, aye.
Councilor Ethan Evans.
Councilor Ethan Evans, aye.
Councilor Jared Evans.
Councilor Jared Evans, aye.
Graves.
Councilor Graves, aye.
Councilor Gray.
Aye.
Councilor Hart.
Councilor Hart, aye.
Councilor Jackson.
Councilor Jackson, aye.
Councilor Jones.
Councilor Jones, aye.
Councilor Larison.
Councilor Larison, aye.
Councilor Lewis.
Councilor Lewis, aye.
Councilor Mascari. I don't think he's back on yet. Councilor McCormick.
McCormick, aye.
Mallory.
Councilor Mallory, aye.
Councilor Oliver.
Oliver, aye.
Councilor Osley.
Councilor Osley, aye.
Councilor Potts.
Councilor Potts, aye.
Councilor Ray.
Councilor Ray, aye.
Councilor Robinson.
Councilor Robinson, aye.
Thank you. Mr. President, that is 23-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So the next item on our agenda is proposal number 202, and that is referred to Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee. Chairman Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Proposal 202-2020, appoint Shauna Murphy to the Citizens Police Complaint Board. Ms. Murphy stated that she has done large system work and a lot of grassroots work in the Lebanon Fall Creek area. She said that she has done a mission work in Peru, Guatemala, and some provinces in China. Ms. Murphy said that she's interested in this board because she has a passion for everyone to have access on the policies and procedures of government. She said that in order to make that happen, it has to make sure that there is transparency across the board. Councilor Barth moved. Seconded by Councilor Grace, send proposal 202 to the full council. They do pass recommendation. Motion carried by a vote of 13-0, Mr. President. I so move.
Second.
The motion has been properly moved and seconded. Are there comments from councilors? All right, seeing none, we'll proceed to roll call for our vote. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilor Adamson.
Councilor Adamson, aye.
Councilor Ane.
Paul on A. Aye.
Councilor Barth.
Barth, aye.
Councilor Boots.
Counselor Boots, aye.
Councilor Brown.
Counselor Brown, aye.
Councilor Carlino.
Counselor Carlino, aye.
Councilor Ethan Evans. Sorry, Councilor Dilk.
Councilor Dilk, aye.
Councilor Ethan Evans.
Aye.
Councilor Jared Evans.
Councilor Jared Evans, aye.
Councilor Graves.
Graves, aye.
Gray.
Councilor Gray, aye.
Councilor Hart.
Councilor Hart, aye.
Councilor Jackson.
Council Jackson, aye.
Councilor Jones.
Counselor Jones, aye.
Councilor Larison.
Counselor Larison, aye.
Councilor Lewis.
Aye.
Councilor McCormick. I'm sorry, Councilor Mascari.
Councilor Mascari, aye.
Councilor McCormick.
McCormick, aye.
Councilor Mowry.
Councilor Mowry, aye.
Councilor Oliver.
Oliver, aye.
Councilor Oakley.
Councilor Oakley, aye.
Councilor Potts.
Councilor Potts, aye.
Councilor Ray.
Councilor Ray, aye.
Councilor Robinson.
Councilor Robinson, aye.
Mr. President, the vote is unanimous.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item on the agenda is proposal number 203, and we will come back to admin and finance when we run through this. Proposal number 203, referred to Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee Chairman Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Proposal 203, 2020 appoints Terry Webster to the Marion County Community Corrections Advisory Board. Mr. Webster said that he is the senior pastor of New Corinthians Church for over 25 years. He serves as a mentor to many young men in our city. He said that he would love to serve on this board to add value to the work that's already been done by the board members. Councilor Ane moved and seconded by Councilor Mascari. Proposal 203 to the full council. They do pass recommendation. Motion carried, Mr. President, by a vote of 13-0. I so move.
Second.
The motion has been properly moved and seconded. Are there any comments from councilors? All right, seeing none, we will now proceed to roll call for our vote. Madam Clerk.
Mr. President, Councilor Adamson.
Councilor Adamson, aye.
Councilor Ane.
Ane, aye.
Councilor Barth.
Barth, aye.
Councilor Boots.
Boots, aye.
Councilor Councilor Brown. Councilor Carlino.
Counselor Carlino, aye.
Bill.
Councilor Dilk, aye.
Councilor Ethan Evans.
Councilor Ethan Evans, aye.
Councilor Jared Evans.
Councilor Jared Evans, aye.
Councilor Graves.
Councilor Graves, aye.
Councilor Gray.
Councilor Gray, aye.
Councilor Hart.
Councilor Hart, aye.
Councilor Jackson.
Council Jackson, aye.
Councilor Jones.
Aye.
Councilor Larison.
Counselor Larison, aye.
Councilor Lewis.
Lewis, aye.
Councilor Mascari.
Councilor Mascari, aye.
Councilor McCormick.
McCormick, aye.
Counselor Mallory,
Counselor Mallory, aye.
Counselor Oliver,
Oliver, aye.
Counselor Osley,
Councilor Osley, aye.
Counselor Potts,
Counselor Potts, aye.
Counselor Ray,
Counselor Ray, aye.
Counselor Robinson.
Counselor Robinson, aye.
President, that is
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item on our agenda is proposal number 204, referred to Parks and Recreation Committee. Chairman Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, on July the 23rd, the Parks and Recreation Committee met to consider proposal number 204, which reappoints Joseph Wynn to the Board of Parks and Recreation. Mr. President, it was moved by Councilor McCormick, second by Councilor Osley. It passed by a vote of 8-0. I so recommend it before the full council.
Second.
Motion's been properly moved and seconded. Are there comments from councilors? All right, seeing none, we will proceed to roll call for our vote. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. Counselor Adamson,
Counselor Adamson, aye.
Counselor Arnay,
Ane, aye.
Counselor Boots. Sorry, Counselor Barth.
Barth, aye.
Counselor Boots,
Boots, aye.
Counselor Brown,
Brown, aye.
Counselor Carlino,
Carlino, aye.
Counselor Dilk,
Counselor Dilk, aye.
Counselor Ethan Evans,
Counselor Ethan Evans, aye.
Counselor Jared Evans, Counselor Jared Evans, Counselor Graves,
Counselor Graves, aye.
Counselor Gray,
Counselor Gray with reservations.
that aye.
Aye with reservations.
Thank you. Counselor Hart,
Counselor Hart, aye.
Counselor Jackson,
Counselor Jackson, aye.
Counselor Jones,
Counselor Jones, aye.
Counselor Harrison,
Counselor Larison, aye.
Counselor Lewis,
Counselor Lewis, aye.
Counselor Mascari,
Counselor Mascari, aye.
Counselor McCormick,
McCormick, aye.
Counselor Mallory,
Counselor Mallory, aye.
Oliver, Counselor Oliver,
Aye.
thank you. Counselor Osley,
Councilor Osley, aye.
Counselor Potts,
Counselor Potts, aye.
Counselor Ray,
Counselor Jared, yes.
Counselor Ray, aye.
Counselor Robinson,
Counselor Robinson, aye.
Counselor Jared Evans. I thought I heard him. Counselor Jared Evans. Mr. President, that would be 23-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item on our agenda is proposal number 205, referred to Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee. Chairman Robinson. Forgive me. The next item on our agenda is proposal number 205, referred to Parks and Recreation Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Proposal number 205 was to appoint Reverend Larry Bates to the Board of Park and Recreation. Mr. President, on July the 24th, Councilor Carlino moved, second by Councilor Annie, to send proposal 205 with a due pass out of committee of 8-0. I so move, Mr. President.
Second.
The motion's been properly moved and seconded. Are there any comments from councilors? All right, seeing none, we'll now proceed to roll call for our vote. Madam Clerk.
Counselor Adamson,
Counselor Adamson, aye.
Counselor Arnay,
Ane, aye.
Counselor Barth,
Barth, aye.
Counselor Boots,
Boots, aye.
Counselor Brown,
Counselor Brown, aye.
Counselor Carlino,
Counselor Carlino, aye.
Counselor Dilk,
Counselor Dilk, aye.
Counselor Ethan Evans,
Aye.
Counselor Jared Evans, Counselor Graves,
Counselor Graves, aye.
Counselor Gray,
Counselor Gray, yes.
Counselor Hart,
Counselor Hart, aye.
Counselor Jackson,
Counselor Jackson, aye.
Counselor Jones,
Counselor Jones, aye.
Counselor Larison,
Counselor Larison, aye.
Counselor Lewis,
Counselor Lewis, aye.
Counselor Mascari,
Counselor Mascari, aye.
Counselor McCormick,
McCormick, aye.
Counselor Mowry,
Counselor Mowry, aye.
Counselor Oliver,
Oliver, aye.
Counselor Osley,
Counselor Osley, aye.
Counselor Potts,
Counselor Potts, aye.
Counselor Ray,
Counselor Ray, aye.
Robinson,
Counselor Robinson, aye.
President, that is 20 to 0.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. We'll return to proposal number 47. Refer to Administration and Finance Committee. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Proposal 47 was presented on July 27th to reappoint Barbara Howard to the Alcoholic and Beverage Board of Marion County. It was approved in a due pass 11 to 0, moved by Councilor Lewis and seconded by Councilor Jackson. I so move.
Second.
The motion has been properly moved and seconded. Are there any comments from councilors? All right, seeing none, we'll proceed now to roll call for a vote. Madam Clerk.
Counselor Adamson,
Counselor Adamson, aye.
Counselor Ane,
Ane, aye.
Counselor Park,
Barth, aye.
Counselor Boots,
Counselor Boots, aye.
Counselor Brown,
Counselor Brown, aye.
Counselor Carlino,
Counselor Carlino, aye.
Counselor Dilk,
Counselor Dilk, aye.
Counselor Ethan Evans,
Counselor Ethan Evans, aye.
Counselor Jared Evans,
Counselor Jared Evans, aye.
Counselor Graves,
Counselor Graves, aye.
Counselor Gray,
Counselor Gray, aye.
Counselor Hart,
Counselor Hart, aye.
Counselor Jackson,
Counselor Jackson, aye.
Counselor Jones,
Counselor Jones, aye.
Counselor Larison,
Counselor Larison, aye.
Counselor Lewis,
Counselor Lewis, aye.
Counselor Mascari,
Councilor Mascari, aye.
Counselor McCormick,
McCormick, aye.
Counselor Mowry,
Counselor Mowry, aye.
Counselor Oliver,
Oliver, aye.
Counselor Osley,
Counselor Osley, aye.
Counselor Potts,
Counselor Potts, aye.
Counselor Ray,
Counselor Ray, aye.
Counselor Robinson,
Counselor Robinson, aye.
President, that is orders.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item on our agenda is proposal number 200. Referred to Administration and Finance Committee. Chairman Mascari.
Thank you, Mr. President. Proposal 200 was heard on July 27, 2020, to appoint Dan Boots to the City County Audit Committee. It was moved by Lewis and seconded by Jackson at 11-0 to pass. So moved.
Second.
The motion's been properly moved and seconded. Are there any comments from councilors? Very good. Councilor Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say, as passing this baton down to Councilor Boots, I think he'll be a great leader for our council to give us the information on this audit committee. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Councilor Boots, I think you have a comment?
Yes, just to state the obvious, that I must abstain from the vote, but I appreciate the nomination. Would be thrilled and love the opportunity, but obviously will withhold any vote. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councilor. If there are no additional comments from councilors, we will now proceed to the roll call for our vote. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Councilor Adamson. Councilor Adamson.
Aye. Sorry.
Councilor Ane.
Councilor aye.
Parth.
Parth, aye.
Councilor Brown.
I believe she's lost internet connection.
Okay. Councilor Carlino.
Counselor Carlino, a hearty aye.
Councilor Dilk.
Councilor Dilk, aye.
Councilor Ethan Evans.
Councilor Ethan Evans, aye.
Councilor Jared Evans.
Councilor Jared Evans, aye.
Councilor Graves.
Councilor Graves, aye.
Councilor Gray.
Council Gray, aye.
Councilor Hart.
Councilor Hart, aye.
Councilor Jackson.
Councilor Jackson, aye.
Councilor Jones.
Counselor Jones, aye.
Councilor Larison.
Councilor Larison, aye.
Lewis.
Counselor Lewis, aye.
Councilor Mascari.
Councilor Mascari, aye.
Councilor McCormick.
McCormick, aye.
Councilor Mary.
Councilor Lowry, aye.
Councilor Oliver.
Oliver, aye.
Councilor Osley.
Councilor Osley, aye.
Councilor Potts.
Counselor Potts, aye.
Councilor Ray.
Councilor Ray, aye.
Councilor Robinson.
Councilor Robinson, aye.
Councilor Brown. Mr. President, that is yea and abstention.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. The next item on our agenda is introductions of proposals. So, Madam Clerk, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Proposal number 226, introduced by Councilor Adamson, referred to the Administrative and Finance and the Public Works Committee, authorizes the city acting through Metropolitan Thoroughfare Special Taxing District to issue one new money bonds in an amount not to exceed $50 million to finance certain street, road, bridge, traffic signal, curb, and sidewalk improvements in the district, and two, refunding bonds in an amount not to exceed $45 million to refund all or a portion of the callable outstanding Indy Roads revenue bonds, and approves and authorizes other actions in respect hereto. Proposal numbers 227 through 229 refer to the Metropolitan and Economic Development Committee and were introduced by Councilors Ray, Lewis, Mowry, Jones, Brown, Boots, Carlino, and Robinson. Proposal number 227 approves a resolution adopted by the Metropolitan Development Commission declaring an amendment to the allocation provisions for the consolidated redevelopment allocation area for the purpose of designing or designating a designated taxpayer for purposes of collecting tax increment on property taxes paid on certain personal property of the designated taxpayer. Proposal number 228 approves the issuance of up to $155 million of bonds by the redevelopment district, a special taxing district existing pursuant to IC 36-7-15.1 to finance an expansion of the Indiana Convention Center on Pan Am Plaza. Proposal number 229 approves an interlocal cooperation agreement between the City of Indianapolis and the Capital Improvement Board of Managers of Marion County to govern finance, leasing, construction, and operation of the facilities consisting of the Convention Center expansion project on Pan Am Plaza and authorizes the execution thereof. Proposal number 231, introduced by Councilor Osley, referred to the Rules and Public Policy Committee, amends Article 4 of Chapter 202 of the Revised Code to eliminate discriminatory outcomes in the city and county contracting practices as described in the 2019 City of Indianapolis Disparity Study. Proposal numbers 232 and 233 refer to the Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee and were introduced by Councilor Robinson. Proposal number 232 approves the tax levy and rate for the Police Special Service District for 2021. Proposal number 233 approves the tax levy and rate for Fire Special Service District for 2021. Proposal number 234, introduced by Councilor Adamson, referred to the Public Works Committee, approves the tax levy rate and rate for the Solid Waste Collection Special Service District for 2021. Proposal number 235, introduced by Councilors Osley, Adamson, and Lewis, referred to the Administration of Finance, Education, Metropolitan and Economic Development, Parks and Recreation, Public Safety and Criminal Justice, and Public Works Committees, adopts the annual budget for the City of Indianapolis and Marion County for 2021. Proposal number 247, introduced by Councilor Osley, referred to the Committee of the Whole, approves an additional appropriation in the 2020 City non-departmental budget in characters 1, 2, and 3 from the Coronavirus Relief Fund totaling $16,344,804 to fund response efforts addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, including public health measures like the provision of face coverings to residents, programs to combat the secondary economic effects of the pandemic faced by Marion County residents, small businesses, and nonprofits, and expenses incurred or that will be incurred by city county government in response to the pandemic. Mr. President, this concludes the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item on our agenda is special orders priority business. Proposal numbers 239 through 245 are all rezoning ordinances certified for approval by the Metropolitan Development Commission on July 22nd and July 24th, 2020. If no councilor wishes to call down any of the proposals for reconsideration, the proposals will pass into law. Does anyone wish to call down any of the proposals for reconsideration? Seeing none, the proposals will pass into law. The next item on our agenda is special orders public hearing. Proposal 247-2020, which was introduced this evening and was placed on the agenda for action this evening, approves an additional appropriation in the 2020 city non-departmental budget in characters 1, 2, and 3 from the Coronavirus Relief Fund totaling $16,344,804 to fund response efforts addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, including public health measures like the provision of face coverings to residents, programs to combat the secondary economic effects of the pandemic faced by Marion County residents, small businesses, and nonprofits, and expenses incurred or that will be incurred by city county government in response to the pandemic. Is there anyone from the administration who is here to present on proposal number 247?
Yes, Mr. President, this is Thomas Cook, Mayor Hogshead's Chief of Staff.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cook, please proceed.
Yes, thank you, councilors, for the opportunity to speak briefly on proposal 247. As you will no doubt remember, back in June, the council appropriated the first portion of funding out of the Coronavirus Relief Fund. That is a $168 million allocation that we received through the CARES Act from Congress to deal with myriad issues associated with the effects of COVID-19 here in Indianapolis and in Marion County. Since that initial appropriation of nearly $70 million, which included funding for everything from rental relief to rapid rehousing of our homeless neighbors to food insecurity to reimbursement for public safety expenses, we've obviously been both monitoring what additional need looks like here in Marion County, as well as what is going on in Washington, D.C. as it relates to our ongoing efforts to seek additional funding and additional flexibility from the federal government in dealing with what is clearly going to be an ongoing public safety and public health issue for the foreseeable future. Due to the uncertainty in Washington right now as to what the final version of upcoming federal legislation will look like, what we are presenting before the council this evening, while significant, is obviously not an appropriation intended to address all known needs as it relates to COVID-19. Rather, in many respects, this is an appropriation that we believe will allow us to get through another month, hopefully after which we will see action from Congress and at least have the certainty as to whether or not we will receive additional funding, additional flexibility, or frankly, additional time in which to deploy these dollars, since the current federal legislation and Treasury guidance calls for these dollars to be appropriated by the end of the year. This evening's appropriation includes a whole host of individual line items, but I can generalize it into just a few buckets. First, there's an additional roughly $3 million to fund the Indy Masks face covering program. This has been an incredibly successful effort on the part of the council, city county government, to provide free face covering masks to those in the community who may not have access to them. I want to give thanks to Ashley Miller in our office, who's been working with the Office of Public Health and Safety and many of our community providers on those partnerships, which has included in-person distribution through gleaners and some of our community assets, but as well the ability for folks to go to indy.gov/masks and request a mask. And I can tell you, interest in this program has continued at a very significant level. We've been averaging at times as much as 50,000 face covering mask requests requested a week that are being shipped at no expense to individuals across the county. And I know for those who have been out and about, those blue masks with the Visit Indy logo that they graciously provided to us are popping up more and more. So that roughly $3 million will include additional orders to get us through what we hope will be early to mid-October, as well as the costs associated with estimated shipping of those masks to individuals in the community. There are a whole host of DPW-related expenses that are relatively small, but in the aggregate total somewhere in the region of $2 million. These are intended to address things such as equipment leases and maintenance costs to help with allowing our public works employees have been particularly hard hit by the virus because they work in a congregate setting usually to have the equipment and materials they need to protect themselves as they continue to provide invaluable service to city county residents, as well as some additional dollars into the Keys to Work and Pathways to Employment program, which will allow us to expand efforts to employ those who are recently out of the criminal justice system to do things such as beautification, litter abatement, and other issues that will not only help clean up areas of our city, particularly downtown, but also help employ those who are particularly hardest hit by the economic downturn that we're experiencing. And then we also have additional funding in here, as the mayor mentioned in his remarks, for domestic violence prevention, in a campaign associated with our violence reduction team, and temporary housing for victims of domestic violence. This is intended to address an issue that unfortunately has been acutely affected, we believe, by COVID-19, by the economic downturn and the social distancing orders that have been in place. There's also a $400,000 line item for additional food distribution. But I will tell you that the largest portion of this $16.3 million appropriation request from the Coronavirus Relief Fund is in the form of supplemental funding for our rental assistance program. As the council is no doubt aware, the city appropriated with council cooperation in June for $15 million in public funding for our rental assistance program, one of the largest city-run programs in the country. Unfortunately, demand for that program was as we expected, which is to say that we had applications at least that equaled that $15 million that were fulfilled within, I think, roughly 72 hours. We now have a waiting list of individuals as we process those. I think as of a few days ago, we had nearly $5 million, if not more now, out the door as we process those applications. But it is clear that demand for that program, need for that program, especially as we head toward the end of our eviction moratorium and utility shut-off moratorium at the state level, is going to be greater. And so we fully recognize that this additional $7.5 million will likely be insufficient. But given the uncertainty in Congress, but the clear need, we do feel obligated to suggest that the council put additional funding into this to provide some bandwidth into the program that's clearly putting dollars directly into avoiding eviction in our community, which, as the council is no doubt aware, and many of you have talked about for years now, has such a significant trickle-down effect on everything from education to public safety. With the gracious involvement of the Lilly Endowment, that would put our city-run rental assistance program at roughly $25 million in total capacity, and we would certainly enjoy the council support this evening for these appropriation requests, even as we continue to advocate for additional funding and flexibility from Congress. Mr. President, I'd be happy to take any questions, and I know there are a few members of the administration who have logged on this evening to the extent that there are specific programs that you'd like to go through.
All right. Councilor Mowry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Cook, what does this do for, so we have a moratorium on evictions. What kind of effect does this have on the people that own the buildings and own the properties that then have a note due as well? What does this do for them? Like, what do they do in this, like the eviction case?
So I'll try, I think, Leader Mowry, to answer your question directly, and if Deputy Mayor Jeff Bennett's on and wants to correct or supplement anything I say, he should feel free. The one thing I would note about this program is we are not making payments to the individuals who have not paid their rent. Rather, under the federal rules that regulate the way we can deploy these monies, what we are doing is having the tenants apply for the funding, but then we actually have the landlords fill out an application and we convey the dollars directly to them. So in this instance, if somebody is facing eviction or feels like they may face eviction, they need assistance in order to pay a past due rent, they are applying to through one of our community partners. If approved, then the landlord has to essentially certify that they're willing to participate in the program, and these dollars go directly to the landlord to make them whole for what the tenant has identified as an inability to pay due to economic hardship associated with COVID-19. And so in some respects, counterintuitively, it's a rental assistance program as much for the landlord as it is for the individuals who happen to be living there. And the landlords, in accepting those funds, accept a certain number of obligations, not the least of which being ensuring that they're participating in the landlord registry that we have here in the city of Indianapolis, and recognizing the associated rights that those tenants are going to have, specifically not evicting them during a certain period of time in which they participate in the program. But I will tell you, based on the $4 to $5 million that have gone out the door already, it's clear that many of the landlords that have tenants applying for this program are just as interested in the tenants and seeing this assistance continue to flow in the community.
Thank you.
Very good. Any additional questions, councilors?
Yes, Mr. President. Great. How do we get the applications to apply for the rental assistance money? Where can we get them?
No, that's a great question, Mr. Chairman. I'll defer to Jeff Bennett if he is on and would like to respond to this directly. I would say, unfortunately, individuals who go to the rental assistance website will find that currently we're signing folks up for a waiting list. They can't fill out the actual application itself. But if Deputy Mayor Bennett is still on, I might ask that he offer some more specific guidance on that.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks for the opportunity to speak for just a second. Councilor Gray, we're taking names on the waiting list at indyrent.org. It's an entirely online application and waiting list process. This funding that the council is considering this evening will help us start to take names from the waiting list in the next couple of weeks. So I would encourage your constituents to get their name into the queue through the indyrent.org website.
Very good. Thank you. Councilor Hart.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question, and just to make sure that I'm following correctly and to help anybody who's watching at home, we're fronting the money in the federal government pays back that whatever we issue here tonight. In the event that the federal government does not pay the city back, what are the expected or implied risks to the remainder of the city budget from what we would pass this evening?
No, that's a great question, Councilor. The one thing that is really nice about what Congress chose to do with the CARES Act is, unlike most federal programs, including FEMA reimbursement, where we're fronting the cost and then get reimbursed later, they actually transmitted all of the funding from this $168 million to the city in advance. And it's the opposite, where if we don't spend it, or frankly, if we spend it in ways that aren't allowable under federal law, we owe them that money at the end of the process rather than get reimbursed at the end of the process. So these dollars were wired. They're in a segregated account being tracked by the Office of Finance and Management. We've retained outside consultants who are assisting us with preparing for what I'm guessing will justifiably be a significant federal audit of all recipients of this funding across the country. And that's why, frankly, there's been a fairly laborious and thorough process of legal vetting and then compliance vetting before these are presented to council. But the nice part about the structure that they chose is we have these dollars in hand. And so when the council acts this evening, hopefully to appropriate these funds, they are immediately deployable to community partners. And frankly, within days, we can have contracts signed for new programs and have dollars flowing for existing programs.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Very good. Councilor Renee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Deputy Mayor Cook. Just so I understand, it's fair to say and it's correct to say that these dollars are already in the bank.
Correct, sir. So when we applied for these funds after the CARES Act was passed, we received all of the dollars, I believe, roughly a week or two after that, which was a couple weeks, if not about a month before the first appropriation request was put before council. But we have all of these dollars in a bank account.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I yield back.
Thank you. Councilor Evans, Ethan Evans.
Thank you, Mr. President. So you said the first package had just over 70 million, and then this package is about 16.8. So that will leave us with just over 70 left. Is that correct?
I think that math is sort of right, but I think Controller first says I'm more of an idea guy than a number guy. So if somebody wants to chime in, either CFO Hall or Controller Clark, a specific number, I hate to give you something too specific for my own good.
All right.
It would be 70 plus. I think it's in the neighborhood of 75 million.
Scott's correct. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
So just to clarify, you said the money needs to be spent by which date did you say?
So based on all existing Treasury guidance and the rules of the initial CARES Act, Right now, we believe these funds all have to be spent by 12/31/2020 or reverted to the federal government. In good faith, I will say that conventional wisdom and frankly, the conversations we've had with our delegation, and I want to specifically give thanks to Congresswoman Brooks, Congressman Carson, and Senators Broad and Young for their incredible cooperation with the city on these issues. It is accepted, I think, as conventional wisdom that Congress will likely push that down. They have not done so. It would be far from me to criticize any legislative branch, no matter what level of government in this country, but clearly Congress is taking some deliberate time to consider their next act, and so whenever that process completes itself out in Washington, hopefully we'll get some additional change.
Well, can I just ask like one more question, Mr. President?
Councilor Evans.
Okay. So if the predictions are correct about the coming eviction possibilities, not just here but across the country, and I know the recent statements from the governor about ending the moratorium. Do you believe? I don't know if you're like you said, you're not the numbers person. Do you think that $7.5 million, as laid out tonight, would be the right amount for rent relief in the city of Indianapolis, considering the possibility that come the end of this week, the state moratorium would be ending without any additional notification from the state?
Counselor, I think the shortest and most direct answer is no. I mean, I don't believe anyone in the community right now believes even $7.5 million more going into this program will be sufficient. I will say that the flip side of that is this is an ever-evolving situation that is forcing all of us, both in government and the private sector and individual families, to try their best to address needs as we know them now, despite the fact that we don't really know how long this situation will go on. So I think policymakers at all levels are struggling with that, and families are struggling themselves. And so for our part, we have a lot of uncertainty that surrounds what funding may be available for the city, what that funding could be used for. Obviously, the city has its own financial issues that likely will need to be addressed due to COVID-19 in a couple of years, which for most cities and counties around the country is not the timeline in which they're dealing with this. So no, I don't believe this will be sufficient. I do believe, however, that our delegation has heard us on this in Washington. I do believe that there are state legislators and the governor and the governor's office who understand this is a serious issue here in Marion County, and the mayor is obviously going to continue to engage with all of those actors to try to find solutions that make an impact. And tonight, albeit perhaps in a small way, we hopefully can take another step that addresses this meaningfully as we continue those conversations.
Thank you.
All right, are there any additional questions from councilors?
Councilor Oliver.
Councilor Oliver?
Yeah, thank you. A question before, while these funds are being distributed or to whom, what kind of eviction are we under currently as for enforceable, and when does it expire as far as the forgiveness for non-payment of rent? The president has some type of executive order that many don't understand or don't agree with or can take it to court. What the government is saying, what's the expiration date of the eviction forgiveness?
So, Council, it's a great question. What I would say, and I'm going to probably speak for a brief while and then maybe ask Deputy Mayor Bennett to chime in again. I do want to clarify that the state order is not forgiveness of an obligation to pay rent. And I know that for many individuals, that's a frustrating point of distinction. But all that the orders we have seen at the state and the federal level, and obviously here in Marion County, due to state preemption, we don't have the ability to address these issues ourselves. All they have done is preempted the ability for a landlord to seek an eviction. That tenant has an ongoing obligation since the beginning of that eviction moratorium to continue paying rent. And so in some respects, The longer that eviction moratorium goes on, the more you could assume that there are certain individuals who are racking up month after month after month of inability to pay. We tried to craft a program that was sensitive to looking back at when the economic hardship began. And for Deputy Mayor Bennett, I don't know if you want to talk about what our program right now covers.
Yeah, and this actually kind of goes back to Leader Mowry's question. We crafted a program specifically with back rent in mind, knowing that the crisis goes all the way back to the middle of March, which means that people who were affected from the early days may have started missing rent April 1st. And so we intentionally put together a program that can look back if a person has struggled for months, as well as a program that can look forward if a person's hardships have occurred more recently. So we've tried to, in essence, have it both ways, Councilor Oliver, with the ability to pay back rent for people who've experienced hardship for a while, or for people who have just recently experienced the economic downturn for themselves. So we will continue to do that for as long as we have a source of funds available, and as long as we have our community partners in place. We will continue to look back and to look forward for as many households as we can, knowing that the moratorium in Indiana expires on Friday.
Very good. Are there any additional questions from councilors?
Yeah, Mr. President.
Yes, Councilor Graves.
Councilor Graves, thank you. Just curious to know if there would be any consideration given to the recent violent crime index or equity-based breakdown that was created for us by Savvy in some type of preferential distribution of these rent-assisted services. Is that any consideration given to those areas that were hit hardest under the violent crime index that was created for us recently?
Thank you, Councilor.
Yeah, so Jeff, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the initial statistics we have from what's been dispersed? I would just say one of the things that we have obviously been dealing with is the fact that the economic crisis itself has not just affected where people worked, but also where they lived and the intersection of those issues. But I will say, Councilor Graves, I know that you've been passionate about advocating for these communities that have been particularly hardest hit by the virus. And I do think we have some encouraging news about sort of organically the way this program has been developing. So Jeff, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we were sensitive to those issues as well, Councilor Graves. So when we first began the program, we partnered with community-based organizations to do door-to-door outreach in areas that were that are hardest hit for evictions during normal times in Indianapolis. And as it turns out, the zip codes that you are likely talking about were the highest zip codes in terms of applications for our program. So as we continue to get into the money actually being dispersed, we'll make sure that the actual expenditures match those areas that were the highest volume in terms of applicants, which are the neighborhoods you're talking about. So, so without creating a program that that literally sets aside a certain amount of dollars for those neighborhoods, those are the neighborhoods that are already applying at the highest rates.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Are there any additional questions from councilors?
One last question, Mr. President, if you don't mind, Councilor Graves.
Yes, please. Councilor Graves.
What type of reporting will we receive on the distribution of these monies?
We should have, sorry, sorry, Thomas, I just chimed in. We will have reporting dashboards available within the next couple of weeks, councilors. So you'll be able to see the demographic data, the neighborhood data, the approved application data. So we have erred on the side right now of trying to get money out the door in this first round as quickly as possible. So our reporting is lagging a little bit, but you'll see dashboards shortly.
Great, Mr. President, if you don't mind, just one last point of clarification.
Please
Mr.
proceed.
President, is that okay?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. You had mentioned in some form that there would be door to door. Is that in an effort to ensure that those who have transportation issues or communication issues are still being able to be a part of this, or was that something that was in the past? Because you mentioned that you had it even before this current situation.
Well, that was in the ramp up to the website launch. So the door-to-door was in neighborhoods that we perceived to be, and that community organizations perceived to be, the highest need and potentially hardest hit. So our marketing hasn't been as necessary after the program launched, but we would be glad, as long as funding remains available, to revisit that if necessary.
Yes, I would love that. In fact, I would like to communicate on some thoughts on how to get the message thoroughly out to those residents that need this most.
Right, very good. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
So, fellow councilors, is there a motion on proposal number 247?
So moved.
Mr. President, so moved.
Thank you very much. It's been properly moved and seconded. Are there additional comments from councilors on proposal 247? Right, seeing maybe some public comments on 247. All right. Just clerk, do we have any comments from the public that have been sent in electronically?
No, there were no comments this evening.
All right. Is there anyone in the audience here today who'd like to make a comment on proposal number 247? All right, seeing no one, councilors, then we will now proceed to a roll call for our vote on proposal number 247. Madam Clerk.
Councilor Adamson?
Councilor Adamson, aye.
Councilor Ane?
Councilor Ane, aye.
Councilor Barth?
Barth, aye.
Councilor Boots? Councilor Boots?
Councilor Boots, aye.
Councilor Brown?
Councilor Brown, aye.
Councilor Carlino?
Councilor Carlino, aye.
Councilor Dilk?
Councilor Dilk, aye.
Councilor Ethan Evans?
Councilor Ethan Evans, aye.
Councilor Jared Evans?
Councilor Jared Evans, aye.
Councilor Graves?
Councilor Graves, aye.
Councilor Gray?
Councilor Gray, aye.
Councilor Hart?
Councilor Hart, aye.
Councilor Jackson?
Councilor Jackson, aye.
Councilor Jones?
Aye.
Councilor Larison?
Councilor Larison, aye.
Councilor Lewis?
Councilor Lewis, aye.
Councilor Mascari?
Councilor Mascari, aye.
Councilor McCormick?
McCormick, aye.
Councilor Mowry?
Councilor Mallory, aye.
Councilor Oliver?
Aye.
Councilor Osley?
Councilor Osley, aye.
Councilor Potts?
Councilor Potts, aye.
Councilor Ray?
Councilor Ray, aye.
Councilor Robinson?
Councilor Robinson, aye.
Mr. President, the vote is unanimous.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. The next item on our agenda is proposal number 225. Councilor Mowry.
Mr. President,
Councilor.
We are still working out some of the issues with regard to proposal number 225-2020, rezoning case 2020-CZN-801, and the petitioner has agreed to a continuance of this matter. Therefore, I move that the public hearing proposal number 225-2020, rezoning case 2020-CZN-801 be postponed until the September 14th, 2020 council meeting.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Are there additional comments from councilors? All right, seeing none, we will now proceed to roll call for our vote. Madam Clerk.
Councillor Adamson.
Counselor Adamson, aye.
Councillor Ane.
Ane, aye.
Councillor Barth.
Barth, aye.
Councillor Boots.
I appreciate the petitioner's willingness to continue the discussion. Therefore, I vote aye.
Councillor Brown.
Councillor Brown, aye.
Councillor Carlino.
Counselor Carlino, aye.
Councillor Dilk.
Councilor Dilk, aye.
Councillor Ethan Evans.
Councillor Ethan Evans, aye.
Councillor Jared Evans.
Counselor Jared Evans, aye.
Councillor Graves.
Councilor Graves, aye.
Councillor Gray.
Councilor Gray, aye.
Councillor Hart.
Councilor Hart, aye.
Councillor Jackson.
Councillor Jackson, aye.
Councillor Jones.
Counselor Jones, aye.
Councillor Larison.
Counselor Larison, aye.
Councillor Lewis.
Councillor Lewis, aye.
Councillor Mascari.
Councilor Mascari, aye.
McCormick.
McCormick, aye.
Councillor Mowry.
Councilor Mowry, aye.
Councillor Oliver.
Counselor Oliver, aye.
Councillor Osley.
Councilor Osley, aye.
Councillor Potts.
Counselor Potts, aye.
Councillor Ray.
Counselor Ray, aye.
Councillor Robinson.
Councilor Robinson, aye.
Mr. President, the vote is unanimous.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. There is no business under special orders, unfinished business. So now we will now proceed to special orders final adoption. And that next item on our agenda is proposal number 161, referred to Metropolitan and Economic Development Committee. Chairwoman Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Proposal number 161 approves the issuance of an economic development tax increment revenue bonds in an aggregate amount not to exceed $7.1 million for Kite Realty Group to finance the acquisition, construction, and equipment of certain economic development facilities. The president of Kite Realty Group Trust gave a PowerPoint presentation making the key points regarding Glendale Town Center redevelopment project. Approximately $53 million in total investment, a total of 267 residential units, 56,000 square feet of retail space, public and private parking facilities, consists of 20% affordable housing at 80% AMI with a minimum of 10% of each unit type. The project will incorporate the public art on site and will contribute 1% of the full project cost to the Public Art for Neighborhood Fund. Construction will begin in 2020 and will be fully accessible by 2023. The proposal passed out of committee by a vote of 11-2, with Councilor Brown and Jackson abstaining. Mr. President, I so move.
Second.
The motion has been properly moved and seconded. Are there comments from councilors? Councilor Potts.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to Madam Chair Lewis as well. Just a brief thought. I'm just incredibly enthusiastic about supporting this proposal. This is a wonderful collaboration between the developer and the neighboring communities to turn a property into something that's going to be such an asset for District 2 and for our city. So I hope my colleagues join me in supporting this proposal tonight. Thank you, Mr. President.
Sir Jackson.
Madam Majority Leader, who did you say abstained?
I have in my notes, Councilor Jackson, is that not?
I did not abstain on this one either.
I voted in support of it.
Maybe, I apologize. Maybe that it was my minutes may be inaccurate. I do apologize. Maybe it was motioned by Councilor Brown, seconded by Jackson.
I think Councilor Potts did the motion. I think there's another issue that involved a nonprofit, so that would have been where Councilor Jackson and I would have had to step back.
Mr. President, it sounds like my minutes are off.
Very good. Are there any additional comments? Councilor Ethan Evans, please.
Thank you, President. And this does sound like an amazing project, and I'm very happy to be supportive of it and my fellow councilor in District 2. I did just want to ask about the development of it. So the apartments themselves, did they discuss if it's going to be the market rate? Is it going to be affordable? How's parts of it going to be affordable rate? Was that any discussed at all? That was the only question I had.
Mr. President, I'm sorry, maybe I said that a little too quickly, but the project will consist of 20% affordable housing at 80% AMI with a minimum of 10% for each unit.
Thank you. Councilor Evans, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, very good. Are there additional comments from councilors?
Mr. President, may I speak?
I think that is Councilor Boots. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, please proceed.
Thank you. I too just wanted to offer my support for this. It is on a border near my district, and a lot of my constituents regularly attend and visit that area, and it's been an undeveloped area for decades, and I think this is a wonderful opportunity for some new growth in that area. And I encourage that not only with the housing development, but and I know DPW has made the commitment, and I encourage them to continue to improve the infrastructure in that area, particularly some of the interchanges with the increased traffic and with heavy residential in the area. There's already a considerable amount of people through neighborhoods and things of that sort. And Kessler is at times a high-speed thoroughfare. So I encourage the infrastructure to be improved in the area and welcome the opportunity to work with the folks doing that. And I encourage our fellow councilors to join Councilor Potts in supporting the proposal. Thank you.
Very good. Any additional comments from councilors? All right, I see that we have Ms. Martin, Ms. Scarlett Martin from D&D. Would you like to make any comment?
No, sir. I have no comments.
All right, very good. If there are no further comments, then we will proceed to roll call for a vote. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilor Adamson.
Councilor Adamson, aye.
Councilor Ane.
Councilor Ane, aye.
Councilor Barth.
Barth, aye.
Councilor Boots.
Boots, aye.
Councilor Brown.
Councilor Brown, aye.
Councilor Carlino.
Councilor Carlino, aye.
Councilor Dilk.
Councilor Dilk, aye.
Councilor Ethan Evans.
Councilor Ethan Evans, aye.
Councilor Jared Evans.
Councilor Jared Evans, aye.
Councilor Graves.
Councilor Graves, aye.
Councilor Gray.
Councilor Gray, aye.
Councilor Hart.
Councilor Hart, aye.
Councilor Jackson.
Councilor Jackson, aye.
Councilor Jones.
Councilor Jones, aye.
Councilor Larison.
Councilor Larison, aye.
Councilor Lewis.
Councilor Lewis, aye.
Councilor Mascari,
Councilor Mascari, aye.
Councilor McCormick,
McCormick, aye.
Councilor Mowry,
Counselor Mowry, aye.
Councilor Oliver,
Oliver, aye.
Councilor Oakley,
Councilor Osili, aye.
Councilor Potts,
Councillor Potts, aye.
Councilor Ray,
Counselor Ray, aye.
Councilor Robinson.
Councilor Robinson, aye.
The vote is unanimous.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item on our agenda is proposal number 183, referred to Metropolitan Economic Development Committee. Chairwoman Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President. With consent, I would like to take proposal number 183 and 184 together.
Consent. Consent.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. President. Proposal number 183 amends the declaratory resolution which established the Glendale redevelopment area and approves of development for said area by removing certain parcels of property from the allocation area in connection with a proposed creation of a new Glendale 2 TIF allocation area. Proposal number 184 approves a declaratory resolution and amendment to the Glendale redevelopment plan and declares that a portion of the area be designated as a new TIF allocation area known as the Glendale 2 allocation area. Emily Mack, Director of the Department of Metropolitan Development, said that both proposals create a new allocation area for the existing retail area. The proposal passed out of committee by a vote of 11-0. Mr. President, I so move.
Second.
The motion has been properly moved and seconded. Are there comments from councilors? All right, seeing none, we'll now proceed to roll call for our vote. Madam Clerk.
Councilor Adamson,
Counselor Adamson, aye.
Councilor Ane,
Councilor Ane, aye.
Councilor Barth,
Barth, aye.
Councilor Boots,
Councilor Boots, aye.
Councilor Brown,
Councillor Brown, aye.
Councilor Carlino,
Counselor Carlino, aye.
Councilor Dilk,
Councilor Dilk, aye.
Councilor Ethan Evans,
Councillor Ethan Evans, aye.
Councilor Jared Evans,
Counselor Jared Evans, aye.
Councilor Graves, Councilor Graves, Councilor Gray,
Councilor Gray, aye.
Councilor Hart,
Councilor Hart, aye.
Councilor Jackson,
Councilor Jackson, aye.
Councilor Jones,
Counselor Jones, aye.
Madam Clerk, can you hear me?
Councilor Graves, yes, I can hear you.
Councilor Gray's aye. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilor Larison,
Counselor Larison, aye.
Councilor Lewis,
Councilor Lewis, aye.
Councilor Mascari,
Mascari, aye.
Councilor McCormick,
McCormick, aye.
Councilor Mowry,
Counselor Mowry, aye.
Councilor Oliver,
Oliver, aye.
Councilor Oakley,
Councilor Osili, aye.
Councilor Potts,
Councillor Potts, aye.
Councilor Ray,
Counselor Ray, aye.
Councilor Robinson.
Councilor Robinson, aye.
Mr. President, the vote is unanimous.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item on our agenda is proposal number 185, referred to Metropolitan Economic Development Committee. Chairwoman Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Proposal number 185 approves a statement of benefit of Eli Lilly and Company as an applicant for tax abatement for property located in an economic revitalization area. Michael Connor, Senior Director, Eli Lilly and Company, gave a PowerPoint presentation making the key points. Lilly spent over $350 million with over 250 Marion County vendors in 2019. Investment one, $100 million will support new diabetes therapy Investment 2, 70 million supporting the existing diabetes model, 10 million in real estate, 10 million in real property investment, 60 million in personal property investment. Investment 3, 112 million supporting current and new diabetes therapy molecules. This project will create 100 new jobs. 20 new positions already have been established. The baseline salary, we're looking at $61,000 per year. The proposal passed out of committee by a vote of 8-2, with Councilor Adamson and Evans casting a negative vote. Mr. President, I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Right. The motion's been properly moved and seconded. Are there comments from councilors?
Mr. President.
Councilor Jared Evans.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make a couple of remarks here, mostly for those who may be tuning in and why I'm going to be voting no on this proposal. Mr. President, this tax incentive is the third one in 7 years for the Eli Lilly Corporation. Less than 30% of their employees, based off of their own analysis, live in Indianapolis, meaning that Indianapolis citizens are the ones who are paying for donut counties like Carmel to have a higher wage and the benefits of the tax income or the income tax. So they're getting more tax revenue for their cities and counties while Indianapolis citizens are paying the brunt of this. Taxpayers have paid for roughly 10% of the build out of the last 3 tax incentives that we have given Eli Lilly in the past 7 years. For $23 million, Indianapolis citizens will roughly get 38 jobs out of the 100 permanent jobs, that is, and keep an additional 20. And the other point I want to make, and it's rare that Democrats give Republican props, but I'm going to give them one here. Indiana is one of the best states for business regarding low taxes. So I beg the question, why aren't we using that to our advantage? Instead, our city has given them more than near $90 million for the last 3 deals, assuming this one passed tonight. The sixth point I want to make is that I've heard many of my colleagues complain about the lack of funding for their initiatives. So I point out that it takes revenue, such as property tax revenue, for those initiatives. And then probably the slap in the face, Mr. President, is that at their last incentive deal, we found out that they regularly appeal their tax assessment, costing taxpayers even more money trying to fight to get them to pay their fair share of tax revenue. Mr. President, I'm just going to be blunt about it. The citizens of this city need a council that is fighting for the initiatives that they want done in this city instead of giving handouts to corporations based in a good and friendly tax state. We need revenue to get things moving in the city. This is a fine example of why we should be voting no tonight.
Very good. Thank you, Councilor. Any additional comments?
Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Councilor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Is Mr. O'Connor on the line? Can he speak to the community work that the corporation does throughout the city of Indianapolis and central Indiana, and the amount of resources they provide to make our city a safe, well, and functional city?
Is Mr. O'Connor on the phone?
I am, Mr. President. Thank you, Councilor Robinson. As in our presentation, and I don't know if the slides are with you from our presentation, but thank you, Councilor Robinson, for the question. Lilly has long been an active member in a variety of philanthropic and corporate community efforts, whether it's the donation 2 years ago of a parks property at the edge of our property as the downtown area at the edge of our South Street property is growing with residents. We are the single largest contributor to the United Way of Central Indiana. We continue to work to fund things like the e-learning fund that we're all working together on as we look at the hardships our students are facing with regards to the necessary actions we have to take with regards to education during a pandemic. We continue to be, I think, very progressive and thoughtful on the investments we make within our community, our home community. I would only correct a couple of things. I think the numbers we presented in committee showed that about 35% of our employees are reside in Marion County, not under 30%, but we have been and will continue to be an active member of our community. This is one of a series of investments we've made in Indianapolis, pursuant to an agreement we have with the city of Indianapolis, and we articulated back in 2017 that we expected our manufacturing to grow. We have delivered on that, and we continue to deliver on growing our manufacturing employees, as well as continuing to invest in our community in a variety of community efforts.
Mr. President, Mr. O'Connor, Mr. O'Connor, can you or someone of your staff speak to the investments in racial equity work as of late? I know you guys gave $100 million to the Urban League for racial equity work. In the last few months, you've given millions of dollars towards the work of racial equity in Central Indiana. Can you speak to that?
I can, Councilor Robinson, and although I would love to take credit for the $100 million investment in the Urban League, that's actually the Lilly Endowment, which while they have the opportunity to invest their holders of Lilly stock, we are a separate entity from the Lilly Endowment. You will recall, I think, Councilor Robinson, that the Lilly Foundation, which is our corporate philanthropic giving vehicle, made a $25 million commitment to racial equity in working with a variety of organizations here in the state of Indiana, particularly in the city of Indianapolis, focusing on racial equity within police reforms, racial equity within education. And while we have not formally allocated all that $25 million, we continue to work with community organizations within Marion County to identify areas where we can make those investments.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you very much. Are there additional comments from councilors?
Yes, Mr. President.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that Councilor Oliver?
Yes. On the question, I want to follow up with Councilor Evans brought up about the appealing of the tax rate that Lilly went before the board, I guess last year before last, whenever they went. I guess we gave them enough, or we didn't give them enough. Will this be appealed also? Will Lilly try to appeal to get the tax, property tax reduced, that they're paying too much? That's a question for Mr. O'Connor.
Well, Councilor Oliver, what I would indicate on that, and I think I don't believe he's here, but Assessor Joe O'Connor, no relation, would tell you while we had some disagreements back relating from 2018 and prior, we have actually resolved all of those disagreements between Eli Lilly and Company and the assessor's office, and we are currently active and up to date, and there are no disagreements with parcels looking backwards. Obviously, you know, you pay your property taxes in arrears, but we have resolved all of those outstanding disagreements and appeals within the property, both at our Lilly Technology Center and our Lilly Corporate Center.
Thank you. Council, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. O'Connor, not to put you on the spot, but you guys have been good stewards with the foundation. I know you're separate than the endowment, but we're looking for the council, as Mr. Councilor Evans has stated. We do the concerns in our respective districts across the city with inequities, as far as an example, food security. And I know you can't put you on the spot here, but with the foundations, are there any ways to put priorities in the foundations that help address the need of the city, that where we are high ranking in areas such as food security, as an example?
Yes, Councilor Jackson, thank you. We have a project that is ongoing between the Lilly Foundation, not the Lilly Endowment, the Fairbanks School of Public Health, the Marion County Health Department, and it's called the Dip In Project, and we've identified 3 particular areas within Marion County. If you follow sort of the lifespan along the Monon Trail, we've identified 3 communities that are in that particular area that have significant health disparity, health outcomes in their discrete zip codes that look very different than perhaps other parts of Marion County. And we are partnering with those community organizations, Mapleton Fall Creek being one of them, to look at what might be the underlying causes of those health disparities. Obviously, food deserts are one of them. And so we're working within those three communities. It's an organization or an effort led by the IU Fairbanks School of Public Health, but really identifying those areas that we can work with the people within that community and identify barriers, including how do we resolve food deserts, how do we get more sidewalks built in those communities for safer walking and those sort of things. So that's absolutely the type of thing. If you've met Tiffany Benjamin, we're focusing the efforts of the Lilly Foundation on is we're looking within our own community and say, what are the tools we can provide to help uplift those communities, primarily of color, that are suffering from the health disparities, and what role can we play to provide better solutions in those neighborhoods?
Thank you so much for that, President O'Connor. I'd like to meet with you and Chief Thomas Cook possibly and expand on that a little bit more if we could. Thank you for your response. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilor.
Additional comments from councilors?
Mr. President, this is Councilor Evans.
Just 1 second. Councilor Ethan Evans, I think, had his hand. I'll come back to you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. So I just had a couple of clarifying questions. So if it weren't for the tax abatements, would the Lilly Foundation and would Lilly in general be getting federal funding and other sources of funding aside from this to perhaps complete separate projects in general? Aside from coming to the city, does it happen on a regular basis?
Is that addressed to Mr. O'Connor? Councilor Evans, is that addressed to Mr. O'Connor?
Yes, sorry.
All right. Mr. O'Connor.
I'm not sure what the reference to federal dollars would be, Councilor Evans. We do partner with, in fact, if you've heard about our latest antibody clinical trial work, we are partnering with the National Institutes for Health and that in our work within the nursing home and assisted living community around the country. We do not receive funding from the National Institutes for Health for that work. We actually are funding our own clinical research. If it is a question with regards to would we have taken this project to Indianapolis with regards to or without the abatement offer from the city, I would refer back to the agreement we have with the city of Indianapolis, the current administration from 2017, that says essentially, if you're creating this type of investment within the boundaries of Marion County, we would sort of offer that as you think about where you may place your next round of manufacturing facilities. Indianapolis will offer this type of incentive to you. It is one in which there is no money given to Indianapolis, or I'm sorry, to Eli Lilly and Company. It is a phase-in of what our additional property taxes would be over a 10-year period. No one writes us a check. It is that equipment, that $313 million investment we'll be making relative to this project. We phase the property taxes owed by Eli Lilly and Company on that added investment over a 10-year period. So there is no money transferred, no money of value given to Lilly for this. It is a simple, it is a tax savings to us provided as an incentive to locate either manufacturing expansion or, in this case, 100 new jobs and retain 20 existing jobs. I hope that answered your question, Councilor Evans.
Partially. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. And I apologize, I wasn't around as an elected official in 2017, so I wasn't as aware of the city's agreement. I just got elected in November. So I would like to ask, if it were not for the tax abatement, would there still be cause for creation of these jobs? Would there still be the enough resources for this creation of the research facilities, et cetera?
I think the answer to your question is we are celebrating, I believe, our 145th year, headquartered within just a few short miles of where our founder started his first compounding pharmacy. Indianapolis is and has been our home our entire corporate history. That being said, it is and I don't know if Deputy Mayor Angela Smith-Jones is online, but she can attest she's in competition with cities across the country every day. And so it is a decision that the corporation makes about sort of that enters into a lot of things. We have a base of manufacturing here. Sometimes our risk managers will tell us we have too much manufacturing in Indianapolis. We have too much of an investment in a particular area, and we have to manage all those things, whether a storm like passed through tonight creates too much risk to our manufacturing capacity or other things. So it's not really a question I can answer straight up yes or no. It is a part of the consideration as we are making strategic decisions as a corporation about where we're going to make major investments. We're a worldwide company, obviously, although we manufacture, sort of for particular regions.
Thank you, Oh, sorry. Can I ask? I can ask at the end. I'm sorry.
No worries. Councilor Jared Evans, I think you had a question or comment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to point out a couple of things, make sure it's clear, especially to those new counselors. The endowment is the entity that you see so often donating tens of millions of dollars for issues around our city. And that should not be mistaken for Eli Lilly or the foundation, which operates with Eli Lilly. The other thing I want to point out to those, if you're voting and you're hinging this on the fact that you may get 100 jobs, and as I said, and as Mr. O'Connor pointed out, I was actually wrong. It's not 37, it's 35% of their employees live here. They did this similarly, and I think it was 16. I was a freshman on the council, or it might have been early 17. It wasn't too many weeks or months later then that there was a huge announcement. It cut like 2,000 or 3,000 jobs. Eli Lilly cut 2,000 or 3,000 jobs, many of which were right here in Indianapolis. Mr. President, here's my point. Our city in the next Lilly, in the next Allison's, in the next exact Target, which is now, of course, Salesforce. We should be investing our revenue and the tools that we have in new companies that are coming up in Indianapolis. They'll hire more people. They'll invest more. Eli Lilly, and I don't want to take anything away from them. They've done a good job with their foundation, but that is a foundation that supports issues all across the country and the world, not just here in Indianapolis, not just here in Indiana. Anybody trying to say otherwise is fooling themselves on that. And I'll yield, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor. Any additional comments from councilors? All right, Councilor Evans, Ethan Evans.
Sorry, Mr. President. I just have one more I wanted to bring up, and this is more along the lines of the research you had brought up in conjunction with the IU Fairbanks School. And you had mentioned, Mr. O'Connor, you had mentioned doing projects along the Monon and doing research on how sidewalks could be implemented, certain food insecurity. And I just wanted to, as a comment, not necessarily a question, so you don't have to respond, but as city councilors, it's our responsibility to determine, how taxpayer dollars are spent and where they go, and we need to be held accountable for those specific items, and we need to be accountable for making those improvements in the city. And it's my belief that if a private entity, however good, however well-meaning they may be, is in charge of those funds, come a time when something might happen and they may choose of their own volition to not do those things anymore. And this is not a slight on Lilly at all. I do know they do great work in our city. This is just a saying of how the city government should be running and how we should be accountable to our citizens to our work that we need to be doing.
Additional comments from councilors? All right, seeing none then. We'll now proceed to the roll call for our vote. Thank you very much. I'll proceed to roll call for a vote. Madam Clerk?
Councilor Adamson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilor Adamson, I cannot in good faith support this proposal, so I am a no.
Thank you. Councilor Ane.
Ane, aye.
Councilor Barth.
Barth, aye.
Councilor Boots. Councilor Boots.
I'm coming. Yes, Councilor Boots, aye.
Councilor Brown.
Brown, aye.
Councilor Carlino.
Councilor Carlino, nay.
Councilor Dill.
Councilor Dilk, aye.
Councilor Ethan Evans.
Councilor Ethan Evans, nay.
Councilor Jared Evans.
Councilor Jared Evans, nay.
Councilor Graves.
Councilor Graves, no.
Councilor Graves, can you repeat your vote?
No.
Councilor Gray.
That's great, yes.
Councilor Hart.
Councilor Hart, aye.
Councilor Jackson.
Councilor Jackson, aye.
Jones.
Councilor Jones, aye.
Councilor Larison.
Councilor Larson, aye.
Councilor Lewis.
Councilor Lewis, aye.
Councilor Mascari.
Councilor Mascari, aye.
Councilor McCormick.
McCormick, aye.
Councilor Mallory.
Councilor Mallory, aye.
Councilor Oliver.
Councilor Oliver, nay.
Councilor Osley.
Councilor Osley, aye.
Councilor Potts.
Councilor Potts, aye.
Councilor Ray.
Councilor Ray, aye.
Councilor Robinson.
Councilor Robinson, aye.
Mr. President, that it looks like 18 for A.
Wait.
I think they may be correct.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Sorry, Mr. President, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what the roll call was. Could she repeat that?
Madam Clerk, would you repeat that again, please?
Yes. Looks like 6 for nay. All right. Yay.
Madam Clerk, do remember that we only have 24 this evening.
Mr. President?
Yes, Councilor
Are we anticipating a 25th vote from Councillor Holliday? Is he no longer casting a vote? So I think we have all 24 votes. Is that correct? If it's 18-6?
I believe so.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, I think we have it at 18-6. Is that correct?
Sorry, yes, that is what I have.
All right, very good. Our next item on our agenda is proposal number 186, referred to Municipal Corporations Committee. Chairman Gray.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Municipal Corporation Committee met on Wednesday, July 22nd, and we had 3 proposals on our agenda. And the first one was proposal number 186. 186 approved the issuing of general obligation bonds in the principal amount not to exceed $5,350,000 to procure funding for the Center for Black Literature and Cultural Digital Projects, the renovation and update of all or a portion of the existing learning curve at the Central Library, facilities renovations and updates at several facilities operated by the public library, the acquisition of equipment, furniture, collections, materials for use in one or more facilities, and other facility improvements and costs of issuing. Director Jackanitis assured us that the bond issue would not raise their debt plan, which would keep it at a rate of below 0.0318. This would be no new debt. And Mr. President, I move that we send it that we pass it with a full pass recommend.
Second.
It's been moved. Was there a second?
Yes, second.
All right, very good. So the motion's been properly moved and seconded. Are there additional comments from councilors? All right, seeing none, we will now proceed to roll call for our vote. Madam Clerk.
Councillor Adamson.
Councillor Adamson, aye.
Councillor Onay.
Councillor Onay, aye.
Councillor Barth.
Barth, aye.
Councillor Boots.
Councillor Boots, aye.
Councillor Brown.
Councillor Brown, aye.
Councillor Carlino.
Councillor Carlino, aye.
Councillor Dilk.
Councillor Dilk, aye.
Councillor Ethan Evans.
Ethan Evans, aye.
Councillor Jared Evans.
Councillor Jared Evans, yes.
Councillor Graves.
Councillor Graves, aye.
Councillor Gray. Councillor Gray.
Councilor Gray, aye.
Councillor Hart.
Councillor Hart, aye.
Councillor Jackson.
Councillor Jackson, aye.
Councillor Jones. Councillor Larison.
Councillor Larison, aye.
Councillor Lewis.
Councillor Lewis, aye.
Councillor Mascari.
Councillor Mascari, aye.
Councillor McCormick.
McCormick, aye.
Councillor Mowry.
Councilor Mowry, aye.
Councillor Oliver. Councillor Oliver. Councillor Osley.
Councilor Osley, aye.
Councillor Potts.
Councillor Potts, aye.
Councillor Ray.
Councillor Ray, aye.
Councillor Robinson.
Councillor Robinson, aye.
Mr. President, that is 23-0.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item on the agenda is proposal number 187, referred to Municipal Corporations Committee. Chairman Gray.
Thank you, Mr. President. Proposal 187 is the sister proposal to 186. What we did in 186 was make the commitment. In number 187, it approves the appropriations for the investment. It came out of committee 9-0, and I so moved.
Second.
All right, the motion's been properly moved and seconded. Are there comments from councilors? All right, seeing none, we'll now proceed to roll call for our vote. Madam Clerk.
Counselor Adamson,
Counselor Adamson, aye.
Counselor Ane,
Counselor Nay, aye.
Counselor Bart,
Barth, aye.
Counselor Boots,
Boots, aye.
Counselor Boots,
Boots, aye.
Counselor Brown,
Counselor Brown, aye.
Counselor Carlino,
Carlino, aye.
Counselor Dilk,
Counselor Dilk, aye.
Counselor Ethan Evans,
Counselor Ethan Evans, aye.
Counselor Jared Evans,
Counselor Jared Evans, yes.
Counselor Graves,
Councilor Graves, aye.
Counselor Gray,
Councilor Gray, aye.
Counselor Hart,
Counselor Hart, aye.
Counselor Hart,
Counselor Hart, aye.
Counselor Jackson,
Counselor Jackson, aye.
Counselor Jones,
Counselor Jones, aye.
Counselor Larison,
Counselor Larison, aye.
Counselor Lewis,
Lewis, aye.
Counselor Mascari,
Mascari, aye.
Counselor McCormick,
McCormick, aye.
Counselor Mowry,
Counselor Mallory, aye.
Counselor Oliver,
Oliver, aye.
Counselor Oakley,
Councilor Osile, aye.
Counselor Potts,
Counselor Potts, aye.
Counselor Ray,
Counselor Ray, aye.
Counselor Robinson.
Counselor Robinson, aye.
Thank you, Mr. President. The vote is unanimous.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item on our agenda is proposal number 188, referred to Municipal Corporations Committee. Chairman Gray.
Yes, proposal 188 is approves the issuing of local income tax revenue bonds of the Public Transportation Corporation, better known as Indigo, to provide funds to pay the cost of certain public transportation projects with the city and county, and pledges local income tax revenues for public transportation projects in the county public transportation fund to the payment in said bonds. This is a result of a proposal that we passed early on to approve the bonds, and now we are trying, we're coming now to approve spending of the bonds. And this is came out of committee 7-2, and I move to the full council.
Second.
All right, the motion's been properly moved and seconded. Are there comments from councilors? All right, seeing none, we will now proceed to roll call for our vote. Madam Clerk.
Counselor Adamson,
Counselor Adamson, aye, and I would like to be added as the co-sponsor of this proposal.
thank you. Counselor Ane,
Ane, nay.
Counselor Barth,
Barth, aye.
Counselor Boots,
Boots, aye.
Counselor Brown,
Counselor Brown, aye.
Counselor Carlino,
Counselor Carlino, Mr. President, I wish to abstain.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your vote.
Madam Clerk, I wish to abstain.
She wishes to abstain.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Adamson.
Counselor Dilk,
Counselor Dilk, nay.
Counselor Ethan Evans,
Counselor Ethan Evans, aye.
Counselor Jared Evans,
Counselor Jared Evans, yes.
Councilor Graves,
Councilor Graves, aye.
Councilor Gray,
Councilor Gray, aye.
Councilor Hart,
Yeah, Councilor Hart, I just want to say that during committee on this, I asked extensive questions around the health of the issuance of these bonds and how it would impact the debt of Indigo. After substantial conversation, it was clear that it was a healthy debt. And based on that and the needs within the district, I vote aye.
thank you. Councilor Jackson,
Madam Clerk, I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor as well, and I am an aye as well. Thank you.
thank you. Councilor Jones,
Counselor Jones, aye.
Councilor Larison,
Counselor Larison, aye.
Councilor Lewis,
Counselor Lewis, aye.
Councilor Mascari,
Councilor Mascari, aye. Also add me as a co-sponsor.
thank you. Councilor McCormick,
McCormick, aye.
Councilor Mowry,
Counselor Mowry, nay.
Councilor Oliver,
Aye.
Councilor Oakley,
Councilor Oakley, aye.
Councilor Potts,
Counselor Potts, aye.
Councilor Ray,
Councilor Ray, aye.
Councilor Robinson.
Councilor Robinson, aye.
Thank you, Mr. President. That would be 20 aye, 3 nay, 1 abstention.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. The next item on our agenda is proposal number 189, referred to Public Works Committee. Chairman Adamson.
Thank you, Mr. President. With consent, I would like to take proposals 189, 190, and 191 together.
Consent.
Consent.
Thank you. Proposal 189, 2020 establishes the interest in purchasing specified land at 445 South Rural Street owned by Chris H. Gary L. and Tyler Kramerling for the construction of a public works project. Proposal number 190, 2020 establishes the interest in purchasing specified land at 2720 Southeastern Avenue owned by Alfonso Tellez for the construction of a public works project. Proposal number 191, 2020 establishes an interest in purchasing specified land at 441 South Rural Street owned by JL Capital Holdings principal member Jerry Tucker for the construction of a public works project. Councilor Oliver moves, seconded by Councilor Boots, to send proposals number 189 through 191 to the full council with a do pass recommendation, and that motion carried by a vote of 10-0, and I so move.
President.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Very, very good. Are there comments from councilors? All right, seeing none, we'll proceed to roll call for our vote. Madam Clerk.
Councilor Adamson,
Councilor Adamson, aye.
Councilor Ane,
Councilor Ane, aye.
Councilor Barth,
Barth, aye.
Councilor Boots,
Boots, aye.
Councilor Brown,
Brown, aye.
Councilor Carlino,
Carlino, aye.
Councilor Dilk,
Councilor Dilk, aye.
Councilor Ethan Evans,
Councilor Ethan Evans, aye.
Councilor Jared Evans,
Councilor Jared Evans, aye.
Councilor Graves,
Councilor Graves, aye.
Councilor Gray,
Councilor Gray, aye.
Councilor Hart,
Councilor Hart, aye.
Councilor Jackson,
Councilor Jackson, aye.
Councilor Jones,
Counselor Jones, aye.
Councilor Larison,
Counselor Larison, aye.
Councilor Lewis,
Counselor Lewis, aye.
Councilor Mascari,
Councilor Mascari, aye.
Councilor McCormick, Councilor Mowry,
Counselor Mowry, aye.
Councilor Oliver,
Oliver, aye.
Councilor Oakley,
Councilor Oakley, aye.
Councilor Potts,
Counselor Potts, aye.
Councilor Ray,
Councilor Ray, aye.
Councilor Robinson.
Councilor Robinson, aye.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item on our agenda is proposal number 192, referred to Public Works Committee. Chairman Adamson.
Thank you, Mr. President. With consent, I'd like to take proposals 192 through 195 together.
Consent.
Consent.
Proposal number 192 authorizes speed limit reductions to 25 miles per hour in the Pleasant Run subdivision, District 20. That should be Pheasant Run subdivision. Proposal number 193, 2020 authorizes intersection controls at Friendship Drive and Lookout Courts in District 20 and 23. Proposal number 194, 2020 authorizes weight limit restrictions on Mills Road between Mendenhall and Mann Roads in District 20. Proposal number 195 authorizes intersection controls at 40th Street and Washington Boulevard in District 7. Councilor Boots moved, seconded by Councilor Ane, to send proposal number 192 through 195, 2020 to the full council with a due pass recommendation, and that motion carried by a vote of 11-0, and I so move.
Second.
The motion has been properly moved and seconded. Are there comments from councilors? All right, seeing none, we'll proceed to roll call for our vote. Madam Clerk.
Councilor Adamson.
Councilor Adamson, aye.
Councilor Ane.
Councilor Ane, aye.
Councilor Barth.
Barth, aye.
Councilor Boots.
Boots, aye.
Councilor Brown.
Brown, aye.
Councilor Carlino.
Carlino, aye.
Councilor Dilk.
Councilor Dilk, aye.
Councilor Ethan Evans.
Councilor Ethan Evans, aye.
Councilor Jared Evans.
Councilor Jared Evans, yes.
Councilor Graves.
Councilor Graves, aye.
Councilor Gray.
Aye.
Councilor Hart.
Councilor Hart, aye.
Councilor Jackson.
Councilor Jackson, aye.
Councilor Jones.
Councilor Jones, aye.
Councilor Larison.
Councilor Larison, aye.
Councilor Lewis.
Counselor Lewis, aye.
Councilor Mascari.
Councilor Mascari, aye.
Councilor McCormick.
McCormick, aye.
Councilor Mowry.
Councilor Mowry, aye.
Councilor Oliver.
Oliver, aye.
Councilor Osley.
Councilor Osley, aye.
Councilor Potts.
Councilor Potts, aye.
Councilor Ray.
Councilor Ray, aye.
Councilor Robinson.
Councilor Robinson, aye.
Mr. President, the vote is unanimous.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item on our agenda is proposal number 196, referred to Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee. Chairman Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Proposal 196, 2020, amends Chapter 202, Article 7 of the Code regarding the Office of Public Health and Safety. Sharon Kandris, Associate Director of the Polis Center at IUPUI, gave a brief presentation. Councilor Marion stated that in listening to the presentation, that's concerned that his district will not receive as much funding as the other districts. Chairman Robinson stated that the $1.25 million was allocated to this program, which is about $50,000 per district initially, based on need. He said that talking to the Savvy team, each had a variety of different social determinants of public health and safety, and the allocations were based on that, with $15,000 increments starting at $50,000, going up or down. Paul Babcock, Director of OPHS, said that if this proposal passes, they'll be using the existing relationship for the crime prevention grants based on the MOU between the City Council, the city, and the Central Indiana Community Foundation to allocate and distribute the funds. He said they have a draft of the MOU and they're working to finalize it if the proposal passes this evening. Councilor Graves asked if this data can be used, is a one-time use, or could the data be used in distribution of other resources? Chairman Robinson answered in the affirmative. Councilor Graves also asked if the data is good for the next 5 years. Anticipate movement. Ms. Kendrick stated that it could be updated over an annual basis, and there will be movement over the next 5 years. Councilor Carlino moved, seconded by Councilor Barth, to amend proposal number 196 by deleting the definition of violent crime in section 202-752A and delete the word violent throughout the proposal. The motion to amend was passed by a vote of 8-4-1. Councilor Barth moved, seconded by Councilor Mascari, to send proposal 196 to the full council. They do pass as amended recommendation. Motion carried by a vote of 8-4-1, with Councilors Ane, Dilk, Holiday Amari casting the negative votes, and Councilor Robinson abstaining. Mr. President, I so move.
Second.
The motion has been properly moved and seconded. Are there comments from councilors? Councilor Barth.
Just a comment, Mr. President. I just like to note what a useful and helpful tool that Chairman Robinson has helped put forward at IUPUI and the Savi Center. Prepared for every district. I have already shared my own district's assessment with my district leaders, my district neighborhood leaders, and asked them to review it. I'm going to ask them to help me in identifying what the priorities should be for the grants. I think it's a incredibly useful and helpful tool, and will help us in the long term really zero in on the actual social determinants of crime in our community that will help us shift the discussion from a solely a public safety discussion to more of one focused on education and investment in the community that I think will help make the city a better place in the longer term. So thanks to everyone for leadership on this. I think this is a really great next step for the entire city.
Additional comments from councilors?
Mr. President.
Yes, Chairman Robinson.
President, so I just want to echo what Councilor Barth said. We want to thank the folks at IUPUI and the Savi Center over there for their great work. This is just the beginning of a larger discussion, a larger policy discussion. As we look at allocating resources, we have a budget of over $1 billion. This is $1.25 million. It's going based off of needs in our city. But I think as we go these next few months, the next few years, this term, we look at a much broader approach on how we reallocate funds to those areas of our that have the highest need based on this data from the Savvy team at IUPUI. So again, thank you for the team there. Thank you for the councils in the committee to support the proposal. Thank you for your support this evening, and we can move forward with a fiscal in our next meeting so we can get these funds into the community where they are deserved. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Additional comments? Councilor Renee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was a nay in committee, and I'll be a nay this evening. Very concerned on a number of issues, but the main one being that some of the districts won't be receiving what I believe to be appropriate funding. And I was a little bit concerned with how CICF was chosen and some relationships that existed between them and the committee. So I'll be a no.
Very good. Any additional comments from councilors? All right.
Mr. President.
Now proceed to, Councilor
Graves. Yeah, thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Graves, just a moment. I didn't see you, but Councilor Murray, and then I'll come back to you, Councilor Graves.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to echo the thoughts of Councilor Renee here. I was too a nay in committee, and I will be a nay again this evening. I do hold concerns with the amount of resources district councilors are given to seek these groups to help, fight crime in their districts and respectively. And I think this is a job very well fit for a public safety director.
Very good. Councilor Graves.
Mr. President, I want to commend Savvy and all those that were a part of the data that was collected to come up with the distribution method. I think they considered those important categories that really, without it, would make any other distribution method unfair. I think they did what was fair, and ultimately the funds will be distributed to the communities with the most need. I also want to say thank you for allowing members of the City County Council who are very familiar with their communities to be able to have more teeth in their work. They know what's going on in their communities, so this will begin the process of allowing us to you have bustle in our community. So thank you very much.
Very good. Are there additional comments from councilors?
Mr. President, may I make a comment? Councilor Jared Evans.
Councilor Jared Evans, please.
Thank you, sir. This is more for those who may be viewing, so there's some background information. One, I do want to give a huge congratulations and thank you to Chairman Robinson
as well as IUPI and Savvy for the work that they've done. This is great data that we got. And for those who are watching on TV, understand that we allocate millions of dollars for crime prevention grants. And at this point, day and time, I have no idea how much money is actually spent in my district and how much influences my district. What we're doing today is allocating those funds based on need. So I don't think I'd be upset if I wasn't getting a whole lot of money, because it means that my district's a little safer. Unfortunately, I'm a little bit higher than others, so I do get a little bit more money. But I want those watching TV to understand that this isn't, it wasn't chosen randomly. It was chosen based on data that indicates the violence and crime that we have in our districts. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Evans. Councilor Ethan Evans.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I wanted to echo other Councilor Evans as well, in that I will be supporting this, but I did want to also mention that my district is on the lower end as well. But I want to, clarify that this will hopefully be the starting point of where the funding will be, and this will not be the ending point. This was a jumping off to help get more resources out to where they're most needed, which is what the Savvy point was about, which is what the Violent Crime Index was about, and making sure that the places that was most needed got the resources they needed. And we can have nonprofits as well apply differently, and that was one of my concerns in the committee as well, was having a different nonprofit. But seeing as how we can have different entities apply, that hopefully will make up for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Evans.
Mr. President.
Robinson.
So, Mr. President, I'll close with this. Thank you for all those who commented on the proposal in regards to Councilor Jared Evans. He is correct in his assertion. So this is just the beginning of a much broader conversation. So again, the thinking is we'll roll this out for the first year. We'll revisit it, and hopefully the councilors and the community thinks it's successful. And we're going to revisit how we allocate all these funds throughout the city, and not just the crime prevention grants, but other areas as well. Because again, if we're not doing things on an equity basis, not equal basis, so some of the councilors spoke to, districts not getting as much funding. This isn't about equal distribution of funds. This is about equitable distribution of funds. So the whole concept is look at 8 data points from the Savvy team. There's many more we could look at. We could have looked at 50 data points, looked at 8 for the purpose of this initiative to look at how we can allocate these funds based on need in a more equitable distribution of resources. People often get confused about, we have 25 districts and things should be done equally. Unacceptable. It's a new day for the city of Indianapolis. Leadership of President Osley. We're going to be looking at things throughout this budget process on how we're distributing funds, hiring practices, vending contracts, and things like that in a more equitable manner, not just equal. So again, thank you, President Osley, and for the council to support this initiative. And we want to look at things differently going forward from 2020. Thank you.
Very good. Councilor Ney.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to state I'm very aware of the difference between equitable and equal, and I'll still be a nay.
Very good. Any additional comments from councilors? All right, seeing none, then we'll proceed to roll call for our vote. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Councilor Adamson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilor Adamson, I wanted to thank Councilor Robinson for his work on this and the folks at IUPUI, and hope that my more fiscally conservative colleagues on the council will remember that we don't want to spend money in districts where they don't need it. That doesn't make any sense. That's bad policy making. So I am definitely a yes on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Arnay.
Arnay, nay.
Councilor Barr.
Councilor Barr, strong yes. I'd also like to be added as a co-sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Boots.
Councilor Boots, aye.
Councilor Brown.
Brown, aye.
Carlino.
Councilor Carlino, aye, and I would like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Councilor Dilk.
Counselor Tilk, nay.
Counselor Ethan Evans,
Counselor Ethan Evans, aye.
Counselor Jared Evans,
Counselor Jared Evans, yes.
Counselor Graves,
Counselor Graves, aye.
Counselor Gray,
Counselor Gray, aye, but I could be a stronger aye if I got more money.
Counselor Hart,
Counselor Hart, nay.
Counselor Jackson,
Counselor Jackson, I want to commend Chairman Robinson. And Chairman Robinson, thank you. That equity is much needed, especially on the far east side of Indianapolis. And the savvy work in bringing that information and resource. And I'd like to be added as a sponsor, and I'm a very strong aye. Thank you.
Counselor Jones,
Counselor Jones, aye. And thank you, Chairman Robinson, so much for your work. And can I be added as a co-sponsor as well? Thank you so much.
thank you. Counselor Larison,
Counselor Larison, aye.
Counselor Lewis, Counselor Lewis, Counselor Mascari,
Counselor Mascari, aye.
Counselor McCormick,
Hi, thank you. I want to echo my colleagues and say thank you, Chairman Robinson. I would like to be added as a vote sponsor, and aye.
thank you. Counselor Mowry,
Councilor Bowery, I will be a strong nay on this one. I'm concerned also about pushing the crime into other parts of the city that aren't getting as much funding. So then people that don't have as much funding at the start may end up with the crime coming to their neighborhoods as well. Let's try to keep the streets clean. I just hope I'm proven wrong in this proposal.
thank you. Counselor Oliver,
Counselor Oliver vote yay, and I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor, please. Thank you.
Counselor
And thank you, Counselor Robinson.
Councilor Osili, aye.
Counselor
Because I know the difference between equal and equitable, I'm an enthusiastic aye and would like to be added as a co-sponsor.
thank you. Counselor Ray,
Counselor Ray, aye.
Counselor Robinson,
Thank you, Ms. Clerk. I do want to make one comment before I vote. So, Councilor Mowry, I would hope that you wouldn't want crime to spread to your district. But if it does, if it happens to spread to your district, you'll get more funding next year. So maybe that'll help you support the proposal next year. You'll get more funding if you have more crime in your district. I'll abstain from voting this evening, Ms. Clerk, on this proposal.
Not sure why I would want that anyway.
Counselor Lewis,
Counselor Lewis, aye.
President, I have 19 aye, 4 nay, abstention.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item on our agenda is proposal number 197, referred to Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee. Chairman Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Proposal 202. Nope, that's the wrong one. Hold on, Mr. President. I was on the wrong page. All right, proposal number 197, 2020, amends Chapter 202, Article 8 of the Code regarding the Citizens Police Complaint Process. Chairman Robinson stated that this proposal, there are 4 key items that the Citizens Police Complaint Board has come up with. Number 1, extension of complaints being filed from 60 days to 120 days. Number 2, incorporate a 5-minute public statement from the complainant during the CBC the CPCB review process, increased transparency of the monthly filed complaints, which consists of allowing for the public access of complaints with a simple report of the name, badge number, and number of complaints for those officers after the adjudication of the case in the hearing. And number 4, to allow for the Citizens Police Complaint Office to have one independent investigator on staff to assist internal affairs of IMPD law investigations. Gina Bevan, Director of Citizens Police Complaint Office, stated that their efforts in their office has been discussing these changes over the past year, and she is looking forward to the passage of this proposal. Chairman Robinson asked President Ingram of the board to speak of the next steps after the CPCB makes their recommendations. Mr. Ingram stated that once they make a change on a recommendation on the disposition of a case, they present it to the chief, and the final decision lies with the chief to accept or not accept their findings from the board's hearing. Councilor Ethan Evans asked if there could be another investigator added to the CPCO office. Chair Robinson said that the office needs multiple investigators. In order to add more, they would have to have more funding for the office. Councilor Booth said that he is comfortable with having the time limit on public testimony increased to 5 minutes. And Chairman Robinson stated that the final decisions regarding implementation of disciplinary actions and measures for the officers will be up to IMPD Chief Taylor. Councilor Barth moved, seconded by Councilor Graves, to send proposal 197 to the full council. The do pass recommendation. The motion carried by a vote of 8-4, with Councilors Ane, Dilk, Holiday, and Mallory casting negative votes. Mr. President, I so move.
Second.
Motion's been properly moved and seconded. Are there comments from councilors? Chairman Robinson, is there an amendment that you need to read for this proposal?
Well, Mr. President, since you're asking, I guess the answer is yes. I'm looking at my notes. I don't see in the minutes an amendment.
I think it might be at the end of your packet.
Wow. It's not in my minutes. Can we have our General Counsel, Ms. Kim, speak to the amendment? It's not in my minutes. In the minutes, it didn't pass as amended. It passed with a do pass. So can we have, Mr. President, with your permission,
yes,
Ms. Kim speak to an amendment that she drafted for this particular proposal?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, thank you, Council Kim.
Thank you, Mr. President. The language was changed to make clear that the required online postings are limited to the findings and dispositions by the board that have been made in response to complaints rather than the initial complaints. Thank you, Mr. President.
So that amendment was read at the committee?
Mr. Chairman, this amendment is the floor amendment for tonight.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. So can you share that again, Ms. Kim?
Mr. Chairman, a copy of the amendment is at the end of your packet. I can email it to you again if you'd like.
Can you share it?
Yes, I will. Mr. President, should I email it?
Yes, please.
Who put forth that amendment? Who put forth the amendment, Ms. Kim? I don't have it.
Yes, I think Chairman Robinson, that was the amendment that you and I had discussed probably about a week or two ago relative to adjudicated versus non-adjudicated.
So I'm looking at my... So is this something that I cannot, do we have to have someone else propose it, or do I need to propose it tonight? That's something I could do now, or should someone else on the committee do it?
Mr. Chairman, you can make the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. Mr. President, I move to amend Section 2 of Proposal Number 197, 2020 by deleting
Oliver, second the amendment.
Excuse me?
You've been seconded.
Oh, okay, so I need to finish it though. Thank you. Mr. President, I move to amend Section 2 of Proposal 197, 2020 by deleting the language that is double stricken through and adding the double underlined language in the highlighted portions to read, Mr. President, as follows. In Section 202-805, Section F, the director shall provide a monthly report of stricken through all citizen complaints against police officers in the city. The report should include the officer's name and rank. Information is listed in Section 279106. Any findings endorsed by the board pursuant to Section 202, and any dispositions by the board pursuant to Section 202806. And the stricken through part is an officer's name and number of complaints filed against the officer. I so move, Mr. President.
Second by Oliver.
Mr. President.
Has been moved and seconded. Is there a comment from Councilor?
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes, Councilor Gray.
Do we have to rescind the original proposal because we already voted on it and then vote on the amendment and then add it? Okay.
No.
What's the procedure?
Mr. President, this is a floor amendment, and we're voting tonight on the amendment, and after, if it passes, we'll vote on the proposal as amended.
All right. Very good. Additional comments. Councilor Mowry.
Thank you, Mr. President. For clarification purposes here, it says the report shall include officer's name and rank. Is that if they've even been, is there anything to say that, just because someone came in and they had a bad day and they thought they had a bad experience with an officer that, maybe should be looked at, maybe shouldn't. Is that to say that anybody that reports an officer at the end of that month is going to be on this website or this monthly report of complaints?
Mr. President?
Yes, Councilor Robinson.
So thank you for your question, Councilor Mowry. Thank you, Mr. President. So this report, Councilor Mowry, will only include those names of officers after the adjudication of the hearing. So once the board, Mr. President Ingram, makes a recommendation after a hearing to the chief, at the conclusion of that, then those names will be added to that list. So if the complaints aren't heard, if they're not gotten to that process, they won't be on the list. So again, after a hearing, after the adjudication, after the decision's been made, those names will be passed on to the chief, and those names will be going public on the list for the transparency report for the organization.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Mowry, did you have another question?
Yeah, just a follow up, I guess. Thank you for the clarification, Chairman Robinson. So in the past, what has the procedure been? Is it the Citizens Complaint Board that gives out the information of that officer, or is it then on the IMPD to give out that information? Because if it's the citizens that need to give it out, complaint board needs to give it out, I don't feel right about that, because I don't go to a hospital and say I know more about the surgery being done in OR room 5 than the doctor doing it. And I don't think that, a group of citizens that are not police officers should be making these judgment calls like this.
Mr. President?
Chairman Robinson, please. Proceed.
So I'll answer. Thank you for your question again, Councilor Mallory. I'll answer the first part of your question, which I think was, if I'm mistaken, let me know, how the current process is as of today, August 10th, 2020, an individual resident has to file a Freedom of Information request to get this information. And then that information can be released to the public. And our position was, an individual resident shouldn't have to file a freedom of information request to get information about an officer that has a complaint and that has a determination. So our thought was that it should all be public without an individual having to go through that process to file to get that information on the officer's complaint. So we decided to make it all open, make it all transparent. I think that's one of the things we're doing for our citizens to give them some ease and comfort with our criminal justice system and our reform process. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Councilor Mallory.
Thank you. So just so I'm clear, so with no feedback from IMPD's merit board or anything like that, we're going to release this officer's name and rank. I mean, why don't we just give out the officer's home address?
Chairman, I can go with that question. Councilor Ane, please.
So, Mr. Chairman, a individual citizen would have to file a freedom of information request, even though the board is a board of public record. I mean, after it's adjudicated, they already released those names. So I guess, like many of the issues in the Civilian Police Complaint Board, it's redundant. We talk about you want to make it 6 months instead of 60 days, because at 60 days you can't, the threshold expires. But the fact is there's already a provision that the board can vote 2/3 to hear a complaint after 60 days. So anyway, I just think a lot of this is redundant. I think it undermines the board's credibility, and I'll be a nay.
Mr. President.
Chairman Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. President. So again, thank you for your comments, Councilor Ane. The whole overall purpose of what we're trying to do is to add some credibility to our board for our citizens. This is a Citizens Police Complaint Board. This is the first line of defense for our citizens. So our citizens want to feel empowered and supported. So we tried to make it a place where they could go to if they felt they needed to have some support against an officer. This is the first line of defense. So we try to make it easy and comfortable for them. So many of these recommendations did come from them. And we do have President Ingram from the board on the line as well to address any of those concerns as well, Mr. President.
Very good. Does Mr. Ingram wish to speak?
Yes, sir, Mr. President, and to our counselors, thank you for your time tonight. I do want to speak to the fact that this is an important and a very important step in oversight here in our community. It's important that our residents have a voice, and the voice that we were given is through the Citizens Police Complaint Board that's made up of residents appointed by either the council or the mayor to take the concerns of the community and use the experience and the training that we are required by state statute and by local code to go through to make sure that as we're ruling and making decisions on these cases, we're not just uninformed residents. We have to go through 20 hours of training on police matters and 16 hours of ride-along time every year with IMPD officers. So this is not just we're not board members who's uninformed or unaware of how the rules work. We're very much informed and very much engaged. And it is only our role to say, based on our experience and our understanding of the law, that a complaint actually happened or did not happen. As it currently stands, the chief of police has the final say-so of whether or not that happens. We have no decisions or no determinations for any kind of discipline. That response is either taken up by the merit board or by the board of captains, or any other avenue that the chief decides to take to discipline an officer. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I thank you for your energy and your efforts, Chairman Robinson.
Very good. Any additional comments? Councilor Ane, I think I saw your hand first.
Thank you, Mr. President. My final comment, I believe, I think Chairman Robinson noted, the Civilian Police Complaint Board is one of the most important tools the citizens of the city of Indianapolis have at their disposal. I'm a huge supporter of it. I'm very proud of the fact that my grandfather Former Indianapolis Police Chief Paul Arnay helped form the board back in 1990 with Mayor Hudnett, Director of Public Safety, Joe Shelton, Bill Dowd, former Chairman of Public Safety, etc. I just think that the changes that are being made tonight gives a false sense of reform, and I think that's unfortunate. I'm open to discussions of reforming it and to changing it where need be, but I don't believe that these accomplish what it set out to, and I'll be a nay.
Very good. Councilor Jared Evans, I'll get back to you just after Councilor Marion. Councilor Marion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think I have, I guess, a follow-up question for Chairman Ingram on this training he mentioned. In committee, I had asked a question about what level of adherence there is to the training requirements and where the current training stands, even, as of before COVID. I'm just curious, because I don't think I've seen anything come through about how well or, what the training currently looks like for each person on that board. Are they all up to date? Or, are they, is it following the guidelines? So I'm interested in that, and I still haven't heard anything on that. I don't believe, from what I can recall seeing. Maybe Mr. Ingram can elaborate more.
Okay, Mr. Ingram, if you would like to respond, but I'm not sure that is actually germane to this particular amendment. But Mr. Ingram, feel free to respond if you would like.
Well, he mentioned the training they have to go through.
Thank you, President Oakley. The training that we have to go through is records are maintained by our board secretary, and that information can easily be obtained by Councilor Mowry by contacting our office and speaking with either our executive director or our board secretary.
Mr. President.
Yes, President Robinson.
So thank you, President Ingram. So what I'll do, I'll get that information tomorrow. I'll request it tomorrow to get where our current board is, the status of each board member's training, and where they are. So I'll request that information tomorrow, and hopefully we'll get it in the next few days, and I'll share that with the committee members. But please know that the current, I think we have one appointment that passed this evening. I know that, and I'm not quite sure when the others were passed over under this COVID situation that we're under. I know that the current board members, some of them may not have been able to complete the process because, again, ride-alongs and things like that may be a little bit more difficult. So, but I will request tomorrow from the office, each of the current board members and their current status on their training. I'll share that with the committee and Councilor Mowry before the week is out.
Councilor Potts, just a moment. If I can see Councilor Jared Evans, and I'll come to you, Councilor Potts.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's frustrating to hear some of the arguments in opposition to this. For one, I just think they're absolutely fake. But anybody who's supportive of the police should support this. This creates another transparency step, and it creates faith. And this is what prevents the protesting and the riots when people believe in the system. Currently, they don't believe in the system. They don't trust in the system. And this helps to build that and build that foundation. So I'm absolutely supportive of this. And it's disheartening to hear some colleagues use every excuse they can to come up with not to support it, because in their minds, it's probably anti-police. But for the citizens of this city, it's a pro thing and it's a good thing. And I hope that the rest of my colleagues continue to support this proposal.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
Robinson.
So just a couple of things. I neglected to kind of share some of the background with our other colleagues. The Public Safety Committee heard the proposal, but I do want to address 2 or 3 of the changes to the entire body, just real briefly, Mr. President. So prior to these changes, if a complainant filed a complaint against an officer and went to the hearing, the complainant did not have the ability to speak at the hearing. So the complainant would file a complaint, do the hearing before the board, and that individual citizen couldn't speak at the hearing. We have to change that. We added 5 minutes to that process where the complainant got to speak. Secondly, if a complaint came in after 60 days, which the majority of complaints came in after 60 days, those individual complaints may or may not have been heard by the board. It was an internal decision. So again, after 60 days, which the current ordinance says 60 days to file a complaint, most of them came on 61 and over. So at that point, it was determined by the internal policy whether that complaint was actually heard or not. And we said that since most come in after 60 days, let's make it 120 days. That way that the complaints that come in could all be heard by the board. And the last piece was that the commander district where the complaint was filed did the investigation. It was the North District officer that had the complaint filed against him or her. The North District did the investigation. And I think that personally, and many residents didn't believe that was very credible. So we've taken that out of the hands of the North District for that particular case and allowed Internal Affairs to handle it with an independent investigator of the agency. So echoing what Councilor Jared Evans said, we're trying to build some trust and transparency with the office, doing our criminal justice reform efforts to give our citizens, which again, this is the first layer. If they have a concern with an officer, the first step they go to is call this office. So again, we want to try to empower them with some changes to make them feel as if they're being heard and addressed adequately by the residents of our city and those that elected us to put us in power to do that. So that's kind of what the background is on those changes that we've done. Thank you, Mr. President.
Very good. I believe that Councilor Potts had a comment he wanted to make. Councilor Potts.
Thank you, Mr. President. If it's all right, could I ask just a couple brief questions of Mr. Ingram, please?
Please. Mr. Ingram, if you're available.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ingram, thank you for being here tonight. Just to ask you a couple follow-ups on some of the concerns that my colleagues mentioned. Is there a high incidence rate of false reports to your office?
I wouldn't say there's a high incident. There's a high rate of false reports, but as in any reporting system, you definitely have people who make claims that may appear to be valid to them. However, further investigation determines they may not be valid.
Okay, and so then the publishing are the findings after these investigations. Is that correct, Mr. Ingram?
That is correct.
Excellent. And so then, and just the other concern that was mentioned, is there any personal information like an address that's being published here?
No, sir.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Very good. Thank you, Councilor. Are there additional comments from councilors?
Yes, question, Mr. President.
Is that Councilor Oliver?
Yes, sir. To Mr. Ingram, to go back to the last answer that you gave about the filing of reports that was not substantiated, do you have a breakdown for 2019 about the board's recommendation for action that was supported by the chief of police versus how many cases were filed like that and how many were filed where they were unsubstantiated in 2019?
I do not have the 2019 data in front of me. However, I do know there were about 90 cases that our board heard in 2019, and there were maybe 70 or so informal cases that were submitted. I mean, complaints submitted, meaning they were submitted after the 60-day window. Of all of the cases that we heard in 2019, I don't believe there were any cases that we did not agree with the disposition as stated from the internal affairs investigation. Therefore, we did not have an incident where we made a recommendation to chief that he did not agree with.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ingram.
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. If there are no further comments from councilors, we will now proceed to roll call for our vote on the amendment to proposal 197. Chairman Robinson, did you have a comment?
No, I just wanted to be sure we were going to, do I need to, after the amendment, if it passes successfully, I just need to do my motion to amend, do pass all over again, right?
Yes, as amended. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Madam Clerk.
Councilor Adamson.
Councilor Adamson, aye.
Councilor Arnay.
Arnay, nay.
Councilor Barth.
Barth, aye.
Councilor Boots.
Boots, aye.
Councilor Brown.
Brown, aye.
Councilor Carlino.
Carlino, aye.
Councilor Dill.
Councilor Dilk, nay.
Councilor Ethan Evans.
Ethan Evans, yes.
Councilor Jared Evans.
Jared Evans, yes.
Councilor Graves.
Councilor Graves, aye.
Councilor Gray.
Councilor Gray, aye.
Councilor Hart.
Councilor Hart, nay.
Councilor Jackson.
Council Jackson, aye.
Jones.
Jones, aye.
Councilor Larison.
Councilor Larison, aye.
Councilor Lewis.
Counselor Lewis, aye.
Councilor Mascari.
Councilor Mascari, aye.
Councilor McCormick.
McCormick, aye.
Councilor Mowry.
Councilor Mallory, nay.
Councilor Oliver.
Oliver, aye.
Councilor Osley.
Councilor Osele, aye.
Councilor Potts.
Councilor Potts, aye.
Councilor Ray.
Councilor Ray, aye.
Councilor Robinson.
Councilor Robinson, aye.
Mr. President. 3 aye. 4 nay.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. But the next item on our agenda is proposal. I'm sorry, forgive me. We have not left this one. The next item on our agenda is still proposal number 197. And Councilor Robinson, I would ask that you give your motion based on this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to move proposal 197 to the full council as amended.
Second.
Second.
All right, very good. The motion's been properly moved and seconded. Other comments from councilors? Proposal number 197 as amended.
Mr. President.
Chairman Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to ask my colleagues to please support this proposal as amended. We've seen the calls across the country and across the world internationally about police change, about police reform, and about police accountability. This is the first step for all of our residents in Marion County. If they have a concern with an officer, to call this office. And again, as we work forward with other reforms, including the General Orders Committee and others, this is the first step in that process. To our citizens, we've heard them. We want to make some change to show that we are listening. And this is one of the first steps in that process. So I'd encourage my colleagues to support this proposal as amended and moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't see any additional comments. So I will ask that we proceed to roll call for our vote. Madam Clerk.
Councilor Adamson.
Councilor Adamson, aye.
Councilor Arnay.
Councilor Arnay, nay.
Councilor Barth.
Barth, aye.
Councilor Boots. Councilor Boots.
Boots, aye.
Councilor Brown.
Counselor Brown, aye.
Councilor Carlino.
Counselor Carlino, aye.
Councilor Dilk.
Councilor Dilk, nay.
Councilor Ethan Evans.
Councilor Ethan Evans, aye.
Councilor Jared Evans.
Councilor Jared Evans, yes.
Councilor Graves.
Councilor Graves, aye.
Councilor Gray.
Councilor Gray, yes.
Councilor Hart.
Councilor Hart, nay.
Councilor Jackson.
Council Jackson, aye.
Councilor Jones.
Councilor
Counselor Larison,
Counselor Larison, aye.
Counselor Lewis,
Counselor Lewis, aye.
Counselor Mascari,
Councilor Mascari, aye.
Counselor McCormick,
McCormick, aye.
Counselor Mallory,
Counselor Mallory, nay.
Oliver,
Oliver, aye.
Counselor Osley,
Councilor Osili, aye.
Counselor Potts,
Counselor Potts, aye.
Counselor Ray,
Counselor Ray, aye.
Counselor Robinson.
Councilor Robinson, aye.
Thank you, Mr. President. 20 aye, 4 nay.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item on the agenda is proposal number 199, referred to Rules and Public Policy Committee. Councilor Lewis, Chairwoman Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Proposal number 199 establishes the Indianapolis Commission on African American Males. Councilor Graves and Councilor Jackson gave a brief overview of why this commission is needed and what issues they would like the commission to address. Kenneth Allen, Chair of the Indiana Commission on the Social Status of Black Males, gave a history of the Indiana Commission and the work they have done on the state level since 1993. Mr. Allen stated that the Indianapolis Commission on African American Males was established in 1992 by then Mayor Stephen Goldsmith, and it is important that the local commission be reactivated. Marshawn Wally, President and CEO of Black Onyx Management, presented a PowerPoint presentation sharing data on the plight of Black males in the city of Indianapolis. Councilor Lewis moved, seconded by Councilor Gray, to amend proposal number 199. That motion carried by a vote of 7-0. Councilor Lewis moved and seconded by Councilor Robinson to send proposal number 199 to the full council with a due pass recommendation. The motion carried by a vote of 7-0. Mr. President, I so move.
Second.
Motion's been properly moved and seconded. Are there any comments from councilors? Councilor Ethan Evans.
Just want to say I'm proud to be very supportive of this. And I also am very thankful for the addition that was made for the 3 additional positions for hopeful eventual community involvement that will be included in this very important commission and endeavor going forward. So I'm thankful for that addition.
Councilor Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say, as a sponsor of this proposal, we've had way too many African American and Black people die in our city. And I know we talked about across the country, crime is on the rise, violence is on the rise. But even one life lost to violence is too much, especially when you have family or friends that may have lost it. And anything that we could do as city leaders to curb that, reduce that, or stop that, that should be our goal. When Black men, when we need them to lead our households and our cities, and they've been endured so much over the years, even pre-slavery and post-slavery to now, I think we should do our part to put a part to the end. I commend this council and this leadership in this body putting this together, to supporting this. Madam Majority Leader, Mr. President, yourself, Councilor Keith Graves, and others supporting this. You know, in the last year, we lost over 451 Black people that were murdered, 616 to criminal homicides, twice in the last 4 years, over 100 Black males. That compared to the counterparts of 2 Asian males, 1 Asian woman, 38 women, 28 Latinx, and 90 white males. So that says we have a problem there. And then over 525 non-fatal shootings, 411 were Black people. So we have a problem, folks. And when one of us have a problem, we should all have a problem. That's how I was raised. We as a counselor, we should be in this together. I don't care if we're Republicans, Democrats, Black, white. It makes no difference to me. You're my fellow colleague. And in this city of Indianapolis, when one of my brothers or sisters have a problem, I feel we all have a problem. And folks in Indianapolis, and I'm not talking about what's going on in Kentucky. I'm not talking about what's going on in Chicago. I'm not talking about what's going on in DC. I'm talking about Indianapolis, Indiana. And our Black men are losing their lives by the second. And we have a problem. This city of Indianapolis hereby declares and finds it necessary and worthwhile to establish this local advisory commission on the social status of Black males. And I encourage you to support this and vote yes for this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Jackson. Any additional comments from councilors?
Mr. President,
Yes.
Councilor McCormick.
Councilor McCormick.
Hi, I just want to say I'm in full support of this commission. I think it is necessary work, and I would like to be added as a co-sponsor, please.
Thank you very much, Councilor McCormick. All right, councilors, seeing no additional comments, and then we will now proceed to roll call for our votes. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilor Adamson.
Councilor Adamson, aye.
Councilor Ane.
Councilor Nay, aye.
Councilor Barth.
Barth, aye.
Councilor Boots.
Councilor Boots would like to be added as a co-sponsor, and I vote yes.
Councilor Brown.
Councilor Brown, aye.
Councilor Carlino.
Councilor Carlino, aye.
Councilor Dilk.
Councilor Dilk, aye.
Councilor Ethan Evans.
Councilor Ethan Evans, aye.
Councilor Jared Evans.
Councilor Jared Evans, yes.
Councilor Graves.
Councilor Graves, aye.
Councilor Gray.
Yes.
Councilor Hart.
Councilor Hart, aye.
Councilor Jackson.
Councilor Jackson, a strong aye.
Councilor Jones.
Councilor Jones, aye.
Councilor Larison.
Councilor Larison, aye.
Councilor Lewis.
Councilor Lewis, aye.
Councilor Mascari.
Councilor Mascari, aye.
McCormick.
McCormick, aye.
Councilor Mowry.
Councilor Mowry, I am very excited about finally doing this and starting this. Definite aye. Thank you.
Councilor Oliver.
Oliver, aye.
Councilor Osley.
Councilor Osley, aye.
Councilor Potts.
Councilor Potts, aye.
Councilor Ray.
Councilor Ray, aye.
Councilor Robinson.
Councilor Robinson, aye.
Thank you, Mr. President. The vote is unanimous.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. There is no business under special service district councils.
Mr. President. Leader Lewis.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to publicly say thank you to Madam Chair Jackson, Councilor Graves, and Leader Lowry for coming alongside immediately to get this proposal before the council. So thank you all, and thank you to all the other sponsors that signed on as well.
You're welcome.
All right. There is no business then under new business. And so the next item on our agenda is announcements and adjournment. The documented agenda for this meeting.
Real quick.
Comment?
May I have a special announcement real quick?
Please proceed.
I know we're tired. I'm doing an annual peace walk to stop the violence, to save lives, and to bring resources to the Far East Side this Saturday, August 15th. Pray that the rain holds off. We're meeting at 10:30 off of 42nd and Post Road, right there at the Reset Center. You can Google the Reset Center, 10:30. Come join me. Let's hold hands, kumbaya, and let's show the residents we care. What better way for city councilors to join hands, and let's bring this in together. Saturday, August 15th, 10:30. I only need you for an hour. We'll be done by 12. So much, guys.
Thank you for your leadership on that, Councilor Jackson. That's phenomenal. I'll see you there.
Well done, Councilor Jackson. The docketed agenda for this meeting of council, just in case, is there anyone else who has any additional comments? I just want to know for now. The document agenda for this meeting of council having been completed, the chair will entertain motions for adjournment.
Mr. President.
Chair recognizes Councilor Mowry.
Mr. President, I have been asked to offering the following motion for adjournment by all councilors in memory of Indiana Governor Joe Kernan, by all councilors in memory of Dustin Gilmer, by councilors Adamson and Lewis in memory of Linda Wilson, by Councilor Adamson in memory of Jane Marie Thiel, by Councilor Jones in memory of, Paul Kelly, Councilor Lewis in memory of Charles Henry Jackson Sr., by Councilor Mowry in memory of Shirley Weaver, by Councilor Osley in memory of Luella Fox and Ngozi Egbuatu. Mr. President, I would like to move the adjournment of this meeting of the Indianapolis City County Council in recognition of and the respect for the life and contributions of those persons I have specifically named. I respectfully ask that the support of fellow councilors. I further request that the motion be made part of the permanent record of this body, that a letter bearing the council seal and the signature of the president be sent to the family of each person advising of this action.
Thank you, Councilor Mowry. Hearing no objections, the motion is received and the requests are so ordered. Hearing no further motions, we are adjourned. Everyone have a good night.
You too. Thank you. Good night, everyone.